Happy begins as property before he even gets a choice. An infant caught between mother and a masked buyer in a world where children can be priced before they can speak. At the slave market, the demand is not for a servant or a son, but for the strongest slave in the world, which tells you exactly what kind of future is being purchased here. That is the hook of Happy's life. Freedom never gets stolen from him, because nobody lets him own it in the first place. Inside the arena system, Happy is not raised to live. He is raised to perform violence for people big enough to treat suffering like entertainment. The adults around him watch, wait, and measure him, which means every bruise becomes an investment and every survival becomes proof that the purchase was worth it. A childhood should not come with spectators, but this one comes with a full seating plan. Deeper in the prison side of the arena, the red-eyed jailer smiles because Happy's pain is useful, and useful slaves do not get mercy. Happy looks up from the dark like he is already learning the only rule that matters here. If he cannot escape the cage, he has to become the thing everyone fears inside it. But even in that dungeon, Happy does something dangerous for a slave built into a weapon. He protects something smaller than himself. The tiny creature on the floor gives him a reason to use his strength for more than survival. And that matters because the arena wants a beast, not a boy who can still care. That mercy does not soften Happy, it sharpens the contradiction inside him. When the small creature is pushed toward violence, Happy's calm cracks, and the arena gets a glimpse of the monster it has been feeding all these years. The cage trained his body, but protecting someone else teaches him where to aim it. From there, Happy becomes an arena legend. The fighter people remember not because he survives once, but because he keeps standing where everyone else falls. The red light and bodies around him are not glory. They are the receipt for a childhood spent being turned into a weapon. By the time the crowd knows his name, Happy has already paid for it with everything normal people get to keep. Back in a different memory, the story snaps into a stranger kind of captivity. Happy is arguing over a photo he never agreed to, and an older man shuts him down like consent is a decorative extra. It is a smaller cage than the arena, but the insult is familiar because someone else still decides what happens to him and tells him to stay quiet. Years earlier in Happy's family life, Father, Happy's protective parent, gives him the one thing the arena never did: pride without blood attached. Father believes in his son, and Happy's sister looks up to him, which makes the coming loss sting harder because this is what he was supposed to be fighting toward, not away from. Years earlier, before the arena legend hardens around him, Happy still has a family memory warm enough to hurt. Mother works herself down to the bone, and the only language left for that sacrifice is apology and gratitude. Happy is already learning that love in his world comes with a bill attached, and he prays over money like one lost coin could decide whether everyone survives. That fragile hope collapses fast when an older fighter gives a confident signal, and the place tied to Happy's safety goes up in flames. The story is dragging him away from family need and straight toward the arena, where fire is not the disaster, it is the doorway. Inside the arena, Happy's next cage is not hidden at all. It is a public pit built to turn suffering into entertainment. An arena handler tries to steady him, while the crowd gets the neat little backstory they paid for, that a bald slave once bought by a master now walks the warrior's path again. Very inspirational, if you ignore the part where the career path starts with being owned. The announcer sells Deathbringer, a newcomer, as the fresh nightmare of the day, and his weapon makes the promise ugly enough for the seats in the back. But the first lesson of this arena is simple. Names like Deathbringer are marketing, and the blood on the floor is the only review that matters. The crowd starts regretting its ticket the moment the violence turns real, with one spectator ready to vomit and another suddenly remembering there is money riding on this mess. Then the bet is revealed. They did not back Deathbringer, they backed Happy Face, which means the crowd already knows the grin is more dangerous than the weapon. One confused spectator cannot understand why everyone trusts Happy Face with no explanation. And then Happy appears with that huge fixed smile doing all the explaining anyone should need. The grin makes him look delighted, but the moment it drops, the joke dies with it. Happy is not happy, he is focused. Happy looks sick, unfocused, and almost under-equipped, so the arena thinks it is watching a broken fighter get fed to the show. But that blank face is the trap, because Happy is not losing control. He is waiting for the exact second when everyone else mistakes trauma for weakness. When Happy hits the ground, he does not panic, he sharpens. He admits the truth under the fight. He plans to kill everyone and leave, so the arena finally reveals what it has made. Not a champion playing by rules, but a slave looking for an exit through bodies. The observers call the match over, and someone warns Happy that standing up will get him killed. But threats mean very little to a boy raised where staying down never saved anyone. Happy roars through the warning. Another voice begs him to stop, and even the spectators turn away, because they came for violence and still somehow ordered more than they could eat. Years earlier, inside the childhood captivity thread, William, a noble family member later accused of poisoning, gets the doctrine of slavery explained to him with a hand on his head. The lesson is brutal and plain. People without parents do not get protected by the world. They get used by it, which is exactly the rule Happy has been fighting since the beginning. Years earlier, back inside the childhood captivity thread, William is not treated like a child with a future. He is kept behind bars in a pit as proof of the rule the adults are teaching him. A sympathetic voice argues that the enslaved child deserves a chance too, but the authority answers with the arena's entire philosophy. Slaves are born with their lives already decided. Still in the past, the authority forces William to stop looking at the cage and look toward the grand castle instead, as if power is a sightseeing tour and the pit is just bad manners. The message lands hard. The world does not plan to rescue children like Happy or William. It only teaches noble heirs where not to look. Later in that same captivity, a hooded man leans in on William and reduces the whole nightmare to money, which is the ugliest part of the lesson. Shovel Grandpa, an elderly caretaker who knows this world too well, tries to soften the blow and tells William not to blame him too much. But the cage has already made the point clearer than any lecture. The moment violence enters, mercy stops being a theory and becomes a test nobody passes. William panics as the hooded man closes in, and the child's wide, broken smile shows the first proof of the arena's doctrine. If the world names you property, survival starts answering in teeth. Now the past narrows onto Happy, the enslaved boy whose ruined face will one day make people call him Happy. He is hurt, thrown, scraped across the ground, and forced back into motion, which matters because this is where his body learns the only language the arena rewards. Inside the arena, Happy stops fighting like a frightened child and starts fighting like the cage built exactly the wrong problem. The crowd watches him get launched, pinned and pushed down, but every attempt to hold him only teaches him that standing up again is the whole game. Happy breaks forward, takes the punishment, and keeps climbing through it until the fight becomes less about technique and more about who can stay conscious longer. That is the terrifying turn. He is not winning because he understands freedom. He is winning because pain has become routine for him, which is a cursed little training program with terrible benefits. By the time Happy plants himself and keeps pressing, the arena has its answer. His opponent cannot make him fold, so Happy overwhelms him, sends him crashing down, and proves that the child they tried to use as livestock has become the thing everyone else must survive. The final exchange ends with Happy still standing and the opponent bleeding on the arena floor. When the victory is announced, Happy raises his fist with that fixed grin, and the spectators finally understand why his name sounds cute but lands like a warning label. Still in the past after the win, the conversation snaps back to money, because even Happy's victory gets priced before it gets understood. That reward talk makes the point brutal and plain. The arena does not see a freed child or a miracle survivor. It sees an asset that just became more expensive. Years before all this, back inside the arena's past, Happy learns what his victory is worth to the people who own him. 1 copper coin. He stares at the pouch, opens it, and the reward is so insulting that even his permanent grin cannot make it look funny. Happy shoves the coin in front of an observer because he wants anyone, to admit the obvious. The arena sells his pain as entertainment and pays him like loose change under a table leg. That tiny coin turns the win into a lesson, because for a slave, survival does not mean dignity. It means the owners found another way to count him. Still in the past, the story widens from Happy's prize to the arena machine that keeps feeding boys into violence. Another match begins, another armed opponent steps forward, and the lesson stays ugly and simple. In this place, a child only matters after he can hurt someone back. Elsewhere in that same past, a masked captive tries to claim royal blood, but the men around him treat that defense like trash paperwork. The point is clear: status, names, and family lines only matter if the arena chooses to respect them, and it usually chooses the cheaper option. That suspicion pushes Sagar, an arena associate who starts looking too closely at the system, into records that were never meant to comfort anyone. As he works through certificates tied to William, a noble family member whose name keeps appearing in the paperwork, the arena's violence starts looking less like bad luck and more like something organized. That night, William is trapped between documents, candles, and the kind of fear that follows a person into sleep. When chaos screams outside his room and a vision burns through his dreams, he jolts awake gasping because whatever he has found is no longer staying politely on paper. By morning, William sits alone trying to make sense of whether he escaped a nightmare or got warned by one. He can barely breathe, which matters because the arena world does not give frightened young men time to recover before demanding their next performance. Later in the past, William tries to act normal by offering to treat his companions at a pub, but even they do not buy the sudden generosity. Then a senior fighter appears and kills the mood with 1 word, which is impressive efficiency for ruining lunch plans. The senior fighter offers to fight William again that day, and the question lands like a threat, because training here is never harmless practice. William's panic makes sense. Every lesson in this place comes with bruises, blood, or a reminder that mercy is optional. A bearded fighter explains the real rule William has been missing. His opponent has been adjusting his strength to keep him alive. Without that restraint, William would already be packed into the corpse disposal bin, which is a workplace safety briefing from hell. William finally understands the offer for what it is and agrees to save the fighting for the arena, where at least the violence has rules everyone admits out loud. The bearded fighter watches him with the others in silence because William just learned the doctrine of this world. Survival begins when a boy accepts that violence is the language everyone here speaks. Still inside the arena's brutal past, a masked challenger storms in, convinced every fighter here is beneath him. He brags that his last win was not luck, calls the roster weak, and announces he plans to take the whole place for himself, which is a bold career plan in a building where retirement usually means a shovel. Happy, the slave-born arena prodigy with the broken grin, does not answer the insult the way a normal child would. When the challenger asks how a kid like him got sold through the slave market, Happy explains that the fighters who could teach him are already dead, so what he wants is not pity, but a real opponent. That is the first terrifying clue. Happy is not trapped here because he is helpless. He is trapped here because the arena made fighting the only language he trusts. The challenge becomes a fight, and the masked man learns that Happy's small body is false advertising. Happy reveals the power the arena has beaten into him, survives the violence, and treats death in the arena as something everyone has already signed for. The challenger came in to conquer the place, but Happy turns the match into a warning label with fists. Later, inside the arena's holding cells, the business side of the cage starts to show. An arena pass marks rank and identity, including the title Iron Face. And the nickname matters because this place does not just own bodies, it brands reputations too. Even a brief moment of human contact cannot soften the rule being drilled into everyone. Carry the pass, prove your place, or get treated like property with legs. Outside the cells, the arena turns paperwork into a public ritual, with guards enforcing the pass rule around the fortress. Saga, an arena official beginning to step into the uglier machinery behind the matches, is called over and led away with the group toward the burial grounds. The point is not subtle. The same system that tracks fighters with passes also has a very organized place to dump them. At the burial pit, the work crew prepares bodies for disposal while everyone talks with the casual rhythm of people who have done this too many times. Shovel Grandpa, an elderly caretaker who knows Happy, watches as a masked fighter notices that several corpses carry the same bruising. That detail changes the whole scene, because these deaths may not be clean arena casualties at all. Still at the burial pit, the masked fighter studies the bodies and realizes the bruises came from bare fists, and worse, they were made days before the final match. He calls Sagar over, although because this is no longer just corpse duty. It is evidence that someone may be injuring fighters before they ever enter the arena. When the report says a victim was simply found dead in the arena, Shovel Grandpa's presence makes the silence around that lie feel even heavier. At the burial pit, Shovel Grandpa wants to drag the Lord and church officials into the suspicious deaths immediately, because the bruises prove someone is murdering fighters before the crowd ever sees them. The masked fighter stops him, because accusing the arena through official channels could put both of them under the same blade they are trying to expose. When Shovel Grandpa warns him about his majesty, the ruler whose temper makes even justice dangerous, the masked fighter understands the risk and chooses it anyway. The masked fighter decides the crime matters more than his own safety, so he promises to return and leaves Shovel Grandpa with the bodies. That choice turns the burial pit from a grim cleanup into the start of an investigation, and the arena's old lies finally have someone willing to pull on them. Back inside the arena, the masked fighter clutches his pass and pushes himself to enter one more time, because the only place to find the truth is the place built to bury it. The crowd is already roaring for Happy, the slave-born arena legend with a permanent grin from ruined facial nerves, and that matters because his smile has never meant happiness. It means the arena broke his face so badly that even pain looks like entertainment. Outside the arena now, rain hits the lower district hard enough that a resident worries about laundry before he notices royal knights marching in. The royal force is not here for spectacle. A stern knight leads soldiers toward a compound and tells them a royal family murderer is hiding inside, which means the kingdom's violence is spilling into the same streets that feed the arena. Bad weather, armed men, and urgent laundry make a miserable little parade. Underground during the storm, two figures hide while the soldiers close in above them, so the city suddenly feels like one giant trap. The arena sells violence as a show, the crown enforces it as law, and ordinary people get crushed between both. Back at the arena, the audience is furious because every match except Happy's feels boring to them, which says everything about what this place has trained people to crave. A past terror is brought up, a fighter who ravaged an entire village a month earlier, and the crowd knows the story well enough to treat his arrival like a main event instead of a warning. The announcer feeds that hunger by promising the next nightmare, while a young fighter grips his weapon and learns exactly how small bravery feels at the gate. Still in the arena, the promised opponent appears as a nocturnal demon, and the match stops being sport before it even begins. The demon laughs at the setup, then explains the bargain plainly. If humans give him food and shelter, he will kill for them, so to him this arena is paradise, not punishment. That is the real horror here, because the arena has built a system where even a demon understands the rules instantly. The young fighter freezes instead of charging, because courage is a lot easier before the thing across from you starts talking about eating people. Then a royal knight steps in and asks who truly belongs on the gallows, shifting the question from who wins the match to who deserves judgment. The fighter is left confused because the arena promised a duel and suddenly delivered a trial. When the gate opens unexpectedly, the demon realizes the weapon in his hand is not mercy, it is permission. He reads the arena's message perfectly and moves toward the royal knight, turning the spectacle into a fight between state power and the monster the arena invited inside. The first exchange proves the demon is not just a chained attraction, because he can meet the knight directly and keep pressing at close range. Years earlier inside the arena, the crowd waits for the demon they paid to fear, but the delay already tells them the show has slipped out of the announcer's hands. When people recognize the figure entering instead, their panic makes the real point clear. Royal power has walked into a place that usually sells violence as entertainment, and nobody bought a ticket for consequences. The armored royal knight orders everyone to kneel, turning the arena from a gambling pit into a courtroom with sand on the floor. Most people obey before they even understand what is happening, because a command backed by a weapon does not need a long speech. One older man tries to dodge responsibility and shove past the knight, but the knight cuts him down for ignoring the order. That single punishment teaches the arena its new rule. This is no longer about who wins a match. It is about who has the authority to decide who lives. With everyone kneeling, the knight notices the one person who refuses to make himself small. Happy, the slave-born arena legend whose ruined nerves force his face into that permanent grin. The knight reads that smile as mockery. But for Happy, it is not courage or comedy. It is the damage the arena carved into him and then sold back to the crowd as personality. The knight attacks because he thinks Happy is laughing at royal judgment, and that mistake changes the whole fight. Happy takes the hit, drops under the force, and still pulls himself back into position, which tells every watcher that the smile is not proof he feels nothing, only proof that his face stopped telling the truth a long time ago. Happy answers with trained violence, not anger, and the crowd realizes the arena's favorite monster can survive pressure that should have ended a normal fighter. The shock in the stands matters, because these people came to watch a condemned brute get corrected, not to see him solve a royal knight's attack with a polearm and bad manners. The exchange settles into a harder test. Happy keeps advancing, while the older male fighter facing him has to reassess what kind of opponent he is dealing with. Every step Happy holds costs him, but it also proves the arena did not merely abuse a child. It accidentally forged someone who can push back against trained authority. Happy strains through the impact and comes out standing, which flips the mood of the arena from spectacle to alarm. His opponent is the one bleeding now, and Happy's grin becomes even more unsettling, because no one can tell whether he is proud, hurt, empty, or all three at once. Back in the present aftermath of that violence, soldiers rush to the injured captain, a military officer caught in the chaos, and the question changes from who won to what this fight has exposed. One soldier can only ask what is happening, while the captain looks up at the scene and understands the worst part. Happy's smile was never a promise of harmlessness, and royal force has just learned that in public. Years before the present aftermath, Happy treats the royal attack like another arena bout, so he rips into the metal holding him back and charges into danger instead of surrendering. To him, a spear coming his way means the same old rule: fight first, understand later. The captain, a military officer caught in the chaos, freezes as the fight stops being a clean arrest and turns into proof that Happy has never learned normal fear. Even the arena officials start running, which is a terrible review for anyone claiming this situation is under control. A soldier finally explains the truth the crowd always missed. Happy is not smiling because he enjoys this. His face is damaged from childhood, his nerves ruined so badly that his expression got stuck, which means everyone has been reading pain as excitement. Back when Happy was a child, that frozen grin turns every tragedy against him. A larger abuser can lift him like property, his caregiver can die in front of him, and people still decide the child looks pleased, which is how cruelty gets permission to keep going. Happy fights back, but that only makes the adults see him as a problem to contain instead of a boy trying not to break. The guards watch from behind bars, the abuser reacts with disgust, and the whole place treats his survival instinct like bad behavior. That is how Happy becomes an arena attraction, instead of a rescued child. Bought through the slave market and raised where violence is the only language anyone teaches him, he sits alone with that stitched-looking smile, while fear, grief, and despair stay trapped behind it. People refuse to believe Happy is terrified, so the arena sells his face as entertainment. The more corpse-like and bloodstained he becomes, the louder the crowd gets, which means his suffering stops being a warning and becomes the product. Back inside the hunt around the arena, Happy hides because he still understands death perfectly, no matter what his face says. When a larger fighter drives a spear down at him, Happy survives the attack and proves the smile is not courage, it is damage wrapped around a survival reflex. Later, in a prison cell, that same fear finally gets words. Happy waits for execution and admits he does not want to die there. He curls in on himself and begs for mercy. So the story strips away the arena legend and leaves a frightened man who was never laughing at any of this. Then another prisoner casually asks if Happy is okay, and Happy nearly jumps out of his skin because the man has been in the next cell the whole time, quietly watching his panic spiral. The timing is brutal. Happy thinks he is alone with death, and instead he has an audience of one. Happy is stunned, but the stranger is more worried about Happy's arrow wounds than the confession he just overheard. Happy answers with that same impossible cheer, saying he is fine, which lands like a cracked cup being held together by stubbornness. Across the cell, a calm prisoner faces Happy and forces the point into focus. Nobody can trust his smile at face value. Not enemies, not soldiers, and not even people trying to help him. His face keeps lying for him, while the rest of him is still trying to survive the cage. Back in the present cell, Happy and the calm prisoner sit with the same problem hanging over them. Death is no longer an arena rumor. It has a schedule. Happy admits he is scared, and that matters because his ruined grin keeps selling everyone the wrong story about him. The calm prisoner points out the cruel mismatch first. Happy talks like a man waiting to die, but his face still looks amused. Happy asks if that is supposed to be funny, and the prisoner quickly backs off because the grin is not a joke. It is damage with teeth showing. Happy accepts the answer, and for one quiet second, the cell stops being an argument. The prisoner realizes Happy's presence lowers his own fear, which is almost ridiculous considering Happy looks like the least comforting hostage package available. Then the execution rules land. Anyone with family who can defend their origin may be called before His Majesty, but anyone who cannot prove where he comes from dies. That hits Happy differently, because the kingdom is not asking whether he is innocent, it is asking whether he belongs to anyone. Years earlier, back when Happy is still a child, his first cage is not iron, it is family helplessness. Father, Happy's protective parent, and mother, his lost caregiver, hold him while he apologizes, and the apology says the real wound clearly. A child is blaming himself for a world adults built. In that that memory, someone calls him Happy, and the name already feels like a bad joke nailed onto a frightened kid. Violence follows so quickly that even a book in his hands cannot protect him, which tells us what kind of education this world gives slave-born children. Father grabs Happy as he cries, but comfort cannot outrun status. The rule is simple and ugly. Children born as slaves have their lives decided before they can choose a single thing, and Happy is learning that bloodline can be treated like a prison sentence. The memory folds father and mother into the darkness waiting ahead, because Happy's origin is not just sad, it is the legal excuse people use to erase him. After that, an adult orders him to stop talking and follow, and Happy obeys with the same grin that will later confuse everyone trying to read him. Years earlier, at the slave market, the place where Happy is purchased as a child, the sellers make one thing clear. This is not a place for children, except the child is already chained in a cage. A buyer decides to take him anyway, and the moment turns Happy from a son into property with a receipt attached. Still in the past, the thought of home suddenly cuts through the sale. Grandmother, Happy's home caregiver, is alone there with only a slave, and that means nobody strong is left to protect the house. Someone decides to visit the next day and see the truth directly, because waiting would mean trusting a system that has already failed Happy once. Later, inside the home, Grandmother recognizes that Happy has crossed paths with someone before, but her shock turns personal when she sees the state he is in. Her anger over the fact that they did not even feed him becomes the first real warmth in this stretch, and that is why it hurts. Happy is so starved of care that basic concern lands like a rescue. Inside Grandmother's house now, Happy has escaped the arena's ownership for one fragile night, and the next test is almost harder than fighting, letting someone care for him without searching for the trap. Grandmother sends him to wash while she prepares food, and when he talks about fighting, she shuts it down like violence is not a normal dinner topic. For Happy, that is a foreign language with soup in it. Happy steps into the bathroom, confused by ordinary comfort, and even the warm bath feels suspicious at first. But once he touches the water and realizes it does not hurt him, the armor he has worn since childhood starts to loosen. The hot water does what no arena victory ever did. It gives Happy a moment where pain is not the center of his body. As the steam rises, the boy who survived beatings, chains, and starvation gets one clean breath, which matters because freedom means nothing if he cannot even believe peace is real. Grandmother keeps working while Happy recovers, cooking over the fire and treating him like a wounded person instead of a weapon. She feeds him, applies herbs to his injuries, and casually tells him they should heal soon, as if basic medical care is not a royal miracle, with vegetables on the side. Happy still calls her master because slavery has trained even his gratitude into obedience. When he kneels in silence, the room makes the problem plain. His body is free, but his instincts are still locked inside the arena. Years earlier, outside the arena's cages, young Happy looks toward the open world with the first dangerous idea forming in him. Maybe there is more than survival. That hope does not arrive gently, because every part of him has been shaped to expect the world to bite first. Years earlier, inside the arena cell, a muscular arena veteran tells Happy that the world beyond the bars is bigger than he thinks. That warning becomes a promise and a threat at the same time, because leaving the cage means Happy will finally choose his path, but it also means facing dangers no referee will stop. Years earlier, at home, Mother Happy's parent, who once represented the life he lost, tells him he can leave if he wants. The offer hits him harder than an order, because nobody in the arena asks what Happy wants, and choice is a muscle he has barely used. In that same memory, Happy's steps shake as Father, his protective caregiver, stays close enough to hold him back from breaking. Happy's anger rises, but Father's embrace turns the moment from escape into restraint, showing that the people who love him are trying to save more than his body. Back in the present at Grandmother's house, the quiet breaks when Happy reacts to someone arriving like he has been caught doing something impossible: belonging. Shovel Grandpa, an elderly caretaker who knows Happy, comes in with a staff and greets the house, then immediately questions Grandmother, because he expected a child, not an arena-built wall with hair. Grandmother can only react as Shovel Grandpa realizes the truth standing in front of him, and her weak smile says the house has accepted the impossible anyway. By the time Happy lies in bed laughing, the victory is small but massive. For once, he is not laughing because his ruined face forces a grin, but because he has found a place where joy might actually survive. Inside Grandmother's house, the fragile peace ruptures at once, and Happy's new idea of safety gets introduced to violence before it can even settle. The damage sends everyone searching for an explanation, because in Happy's life, a torn room usually means trouble has already found the door. Away from the room, William, a noble family member accused of poisoning, tries to argue that the charge against him makes no sense. He insists there is a misunderstanding, but the written proof in front of him matters more than his panic, which is a terrible system if your defense is basically, please read the room. At the cemetery, William walks among graves like a man already being buried by rumor. He keeps his face under control, but the accusation is working exactly as intended. It isolates him before he can even prove who he is. In the noble household, a woman begs for William to get one more chance, arguing he is not the kind of person they are condemning. Her plea shows the real stake. If no one with power believes him, innocence does not matter, only convenience does. William finally breaks and claws at at the door, screaming that he has never even met a royal family member. That denial is not strategy anymore, it is survival, because the accusation has turned him into a criminal before he understands the crime. The noble holding the document makes the cruelty plain. William was never close enough to be protected, only close enough to be discarded. One childhood connection gets treated like a signed contract, which is bold work from a man hiding behind paper. William reaches out anyway, desperate for anyone to treat him like a person instead of a case file. When that last appeal collapses into surrender, the story reveals how nobles handle inconvenient people. They do not kill the truth first, they lock it outside. Back in the present at grandmother's house, Happy gets hit with an expulsion notice, and the room reacts like freedom just handed him an eviction slip. For a man who barely understands belonging, being officially pushed out cuts deeper than any arena punch. Happy sits alone with his face covered, stuck between the slave life he escaped and the home he may already be losing. Then a cheerful pale stranger checks on him, and the tone swerves so suddenly it almost needs a warning label. Still near the house, the pale stranger explains he only woke up hungry and went looking for late night food. When he offers Happy a mushroom, Happy immediately warns him it is poisonous, meaning this guy nearly lost a life or death battle to a snack. The pale stranger laughs off the near-death mistake, but the watching men read Happy differently. One of them decides Happy must come from a noble family, because apparently only breeding could explain a calm face and useful knowledge, not years of surviving every awful thing thrown at him. That guess turns dangerous when a muscular man starts talking about coins, and his men look ready to turn Happy into money. The pale stranger points out the way back to the house, but his answer also reveals grandmother gives him freedom outside work hours, which makes Happy quietly recognize her kindness. Outside grandmother's house, the threat stops being talk when a blue-clad man draws a heavy sword on Happy. The fragile home has barely opened its door to him, and already the wider world is testing whether Happy is a person worth protecting or just another prize to drag away. Years earlier, before Happy ever becomes an arena legend, danger reaches his family first. Happy freezes because he does not understand why armed men are closing in, and a blue-clad defender has to snap him back with one simple order: get down. The child who will one day terrify crowds starts here as a boy being shoved out of the way while adults bleed for him. One fallen defender clutches a tiny ring, and cloth like that is enough payment to make killers stop, which tells Happy exactly how poor and cornered his family really is. The gang laughs anyway, and their leader raises his weapon before revealing the ugliest part. Happy is not the target, his father and mother are. That means this is not a random robbery, it is a hunt aimed straight at the people protecting him. The attackers bind Happy and carry him off, turning him from a son into property in a matter of seconds. A masked captor laughs at the restraint like it is a toy, then hits Happy so hard the lesson becomes permanent. The world does not ask children for permission before breaking them. That little question mark over Happy's head has officially received the worst possible answer. Back in that same attack, the raiders regroup over the fallen bodies, confused only because the violence is not going as cleanly as they expected. A furious man screams that one of them caused this, and 2 more bodies drop in the field, showing Happy that adults can be just as helpless when the blades come out. This is the root of his arena language. Pain arrives first, explanations come late. The confrontation spreads through the field as the bearded raider decides the easiest answer is execution. He orders Happy killed, blades come out, and the fight stops being about stealing a child and becomes about erasing every witness. For Happy, survival is already being priced in blood, and nobody has brought exact change. But the attackers misread what Happy is becoming. He strikes back with raw strength, grips a blade with both hands, and the bearded raider finally realizes the smiling boy in front of him is not harmless at all. By the time the man begs for mercy and the others run, even the narrator admits Happy's ruined grin made him forget the truth for a moment. Happy was a former arena champion. Back in the present, the violence around Happy creates a new trail for William, a noble family member trying to carve out a lawful second chance. William orders 2 men to follow him, while another man reacts with open delight to the rumors chasing Happy through the countryside. Those rumors matter because Happy is trying to live like a harmless helper now, yet people keep measuring him by the bare-handed defeats he left behind. William weighs the stories carefully. Happy has beaten ordinary opponents bare-handed, and even a royal knight once lost to him the same way. Then William finds a wanted poster, and the reward tied to the Exile Clowns, the kingdom's largest criminal organization, gives him a legal target instead of another messy fight. When he reads it, the path shifts from gossip about Happy's past to a bounty hunt that can pull everyone back into danger. William turns the wanted poster into a clean path forward. Exile Clowns is tied to the Exile Clowns, the largest criminal organization spread through the kingdom, so chasing him is not revenge dressed up nicely, it is lawful work. When William hears the bounty is huge, the offer to escort him for the payout becomes his first real chance to stop being treated only as a problem to punish. The others need a second to process that word, bounty, because William has just moved from scandal to public service in one conversation. The question about whether Exile Clowns is a friend lands awkwardly, but the paperwork answers it coldly. Criminal bounty number 1013 belongs to Exile Clowns, and William gets credit for capturing him by restraint. Outside at night, William receives the reward pouch, and the money changes what the day means for him. This is not just coins in a bag. It is proof that the kingdom can still call him useful instead of disposable, which is a pretty dramatic promotion for a tied cloth pouch. Still outside that night, Happy the freed arena legend, trying to live like a harmless helper, admits the embarrassing part of freedom. He does not even know how shopping works. He spent his life in the arena hearing about the world instead of living in it, so every normal errand feels like a foreign language with prices attached. After they part ways, Happy hesitates alone, and that pause says more than a speech would. He has survived blades, chains, and crowds, but ordinary peace is the thing he still has no training for. Later, inside the courtroom, William faces the verdict that will decide whether his bounty capture actually buys him a future. The judges gather under the language of fairness, but the accusation still hangs over him. After the arena incident, William assaulted a fellow student, and some people want that mistake to bury him for good. In the courtroom, the verdict turns the whole room sideways. William is pardoned by His Majesty's order because he showed courage fighting for the kingdom. That means the law gives him a second chance, but the shocked reactions make it clear not everyone in that room accepts mercy as justice. Still in the courtroom aftermath, one bitter watcher decides William's pardon must have been bought by his parent, and that resentment exposes the real danger hiding under the official ruling. While William's parents stand tense and anxious, the Watcher clenches his fist over a failed plan to remove William completely, so the verdict saves William in public and paints a target on him in private. That night, peace does not settle easily over a life built for violence. William may be cleared by the court, but his body still carries the arena inside it, and after last night's incident, that old fighting instinct finally finds stability again, which is helpful in the most alarming possible way. The next morning, William, the noble family member who just escaped a poisoning charge, wakes up smiling for the first time since leaving the arena. The court gives him a second chance, but the real miracle is simpler. He finally sleeps without feeling hunted. Back at the household estate, Happy returns to grandmother, the caregiver offering him the kind of home the arena never allowed. Grandmother hugs him like he belongs there, while Winnie, a household member still trying to understand this arena survivor, spots him from a distance and immediately starts measuring the risk. Happy tries to make his introduction as harmless as possible by hauling a barrel and announcing with that ruined permanent grin that he is happy. To Winnie, that smile does not read as cute yet. It reads like the arena shipped a weapon to the front yard and forgot the warning label. Inside, Winnie admits her fear to Shovel Grandpa, the elderly caretaker who knows enough to wait before judging Happy. Shovel Grandpa does not dismiss the danger, but he chooses observation over panic, which means Happy's first test of freedom is not a duel. It is whether people can watch him without flinching. Shovel Grandpa keeps watching and realizes the strangest thing about Happy is not his strength, but how brightly he throws himself into ordinary work. Happy asks grandmother where to put the barrel, and she lets him help with something tied to her late husband's memory, turning a chore into a small act of trust. Happy attacks farm work with the only language he knows, total commitment. He chops wood, hauls water, waits for instructions, and earns grandmother's praise because for once, his strength is solving problems instead of making bodies hit the dirt. That axe probably has questions for management. Later, near the water, Happy pauses over a fishing line when another dark-haired visitor's silence makes the quiet feel less peaceful. The farm is teaching Happy how to live gently, but even a simple stare can drag him back into the old habit of checking whether someone is a threat. At dusk, the calm starts to crack. Winnie notices someone leaving without explanation, and the household realizes this is not the first late-night disappearance. Because Happy is trying to become harmless, secrecy becomes dangerous in a new way, since nobody knows whether he is protecting them, hiding from them, or being pulled back toward violence. Outside the estate now, the man grips his rope bundle and keeps walking until he reaches William. This connects William's legal second chance to something messier. Freedom may have cleared his name, but it also pushes him toward work where fugitives, rewards, and desperate people wait in the dark. At William's door, a young girl peeks out, and the visit turns warmer instead of hostile when the man arrives carrying children into an embrace. The night errand is not random wandering after all. It shows this new life is already bigger than survival, because the people around Happy and William are starting to depend on them. Outside the estate, Winnie, a household member who has been watching the grown-ups act suspiciously, stops William and asks where he is going. William tells the child he is only heading to the library, which is technically a plan and also the flimsiest cover story ever handed to a kid with eyes. On the street, William tries to steer Happy toward a normal errand at the market, but Happy has already found a different version of freedom: wanted posters. He cannot read the location name, so he makes William useful by turning him into a walking map for bounty hunting. William gives in because Happy is not asking for entertainment. He is hunting a way to make this new life work. After researching all night, William gathers fresh posters and leads him out, which means their quiet farm routine now has one foot in the criminal underworld. Back at the estate, Winnie investigates the rope and supplies Happy keeps dragging around at night. She cannot tell whether he is preparing for work, trouble, or both. But the real answer is worse. Happy is learning freedom through tools that still look a lot like arena habits. In town, the danger becomes official when a guard explains that security has tightened because the Exile Clowns, the kingdom's largest criminal organization, are making everyone nervous. The guard holds up another wanted notice, and suddenly Happy and William's little bounty trip stops feeling like side work and starts looking like bait. Happy and William think they have found their target, but Happy reads the situation faster than the celebration can finish. Dead guards on the ground tell him the bounty was never the easy catch William hoped for, so Happy decides they should leave before the job starts collecting them instead. Before they can back away, the wanted armor giant reaches them, proving the guards failed because they were outclassed, not careless. Happy understands the problem at once. This is not a chase anymore, it is a fight, and William has walked into it with library-level confidence. Happy attacks first with the brutal directness that made him an arena legend, and the armored enemies learn he does not need a proper weapon to be dangerous. But numbers and armor start grinding him down, and the fight proves that the wider world has predators built to survive even Happy's raw strength. Happy is knocked down as the armored giant presses the advantage, and William watches the violence with a reaction that scares him almost as much as the fight itself. Part of him thinks it looks cool. That moment of fascination costs him immediately, because the giant turns on William and strikes him, dragging the harmless helper into the punishment Happy was trying to keep away from home. Back at the farm, the masked attacker finally understands the problem in front of him. Happy is not some random freed slave. He is the kid who once walked into Lucastian's arena and survived it. That recognition changes the fight, because Happy's enemies know his body was supposedly shattered, yet he is still standing between them and William. William, the noble family member who just got dragged into the violence, clutches the weapon he has like it came with no instruction manual and a very short warranty. Years earlier, inside the arena, Lucastian, Happy's former master, turns strength into both obsession and business plan. Every time Happy wins too easily, Lucastian imports stronger challengers, but the crowd stops paying for a monster who ends fights too fast. So Happy learns a cruel little survival lesson. Even victory has to be performed if the owner wants a show. Back at the farm, that old arena trick becomes Happy's answer to armored tactics. He lets the enemy believe his body is going limp, then uses that false weakness to turn the fight and put the armored attacker down. The wider world brought armor and formation discipline. Happy brings the ugliest theater degree ever earned in chains. Still at the farm, Happy feels the same brutal force return to him outside the arena, which proves freedom has not erased what Lucastian built into him. He does not fight because he enjoys being dragged back into violence. He fights because people like William are behind him, and danger keeps finding the door. That is the real turn here. Happy is using the monster training to protect a home instead of entertain a crowd. The armored enemy tries to drag the fight back into close control, where metal and weight should decide everything. Happy refuses to play by that rule, breaks the pressure with raw grappling, and turns the enemy's armor into something heavy enough to punish its owner. It is not elegant, but nobody bought tickets for elegance at this farm. Once Happy gets the armored attacker moving, the advantage flips completely. The enemy hits the ground dazed, and Happy keeps him there, proving that the arena's dirty lessons still work even against soldiers built for war. The cost is clear too. Happy wins by becoming frightening again, the exact version of himself he is trying to outgrow. After the takedown, Happy pauses over his own hand, breathing hard enough to show this was not free. He checks the fallen attacker instead of walking away, and that tiny hesitation matters because Happy is not just a weapon waiting for the next command anymore. He is trying to understand what his strength did, one battered body at a time. Happy notices the armored attacker is covered in scratches, which tells him the fight has finally damaged the shell that was protecting him. The enemy is still breathing under all that weight, but the fear has shifted sides now. Armor can keep a man alive, but it cannot make him feel good about being turned into farm equipment. With the attacker beaten, Happy raises his fist over the fallen enemy, not as a polished knight, but as the arena survivor who refuses to lose his new life quietly. He stands over the body long enough for the message to land. The people hunting him can hurt him, but they cannot treat him like property anymore. That victory matters because Happy has just defended the farm using the very instincts meant to keep him enslaved. Afterward, Happy leans aside and catches his breath, and the silence feels heavier than the fight. He won, but the farm is no longer peaceful. Wanted posters, dead guards, and armored enemies have all turned his freedom into another battlefield. Happy has proved he can survive outside the arena, but now the outside world knows exactly where to come looking. Happy looks like he has stolen the momentum, but the fight is not actually solved. The armored hunter's defense starts bleeding stamina now that the battle drags on, yet Happy's own hits still cannot punch through enough armor to end it. That means this is no longer about who swings harder, it is about who runs out of answers first. Happy hangs on and makes the one choice that keeps him alive. Do not fall, do not give the hunter a clean finish. Then he spots the pattern, because the armored hunter keeps hunting his unarmored head, the only place Happy can truly be hurt. Running crosses Happy's mind, which is fair since the man's whole strategy is basically protect everything except the skull and hope for the best. But the fight stops being just survival when the rescued friend speaks up and admits why Happy matters to him. Happy protected him earlier, and that one act turned Happy from a weapon into the only person who ever called him a friend. Happy goes quiet, because for a man raised to endure pain, being needed is somehow the heavier hit. So Happy changes the problem instead of backing away from it. He reaches into the ruined armor, starts pulling together whatever is left, and tells the armored hunter he is about to show his full power. The hunter laughs at the broken spear shaft, but Happy already knows every proper weapon has snapped against that armor and shield, so trash is now the official equipment list. Happy commits to the improvised weapon with the same ugly focus that made him an arena legend. The broken pieces become dangerous in his hands, and for the first time the armored hunter has to ask what Happy even is. That question matters, because Happy is proving freedom did not make him weaker. It gave his violence a reason to adapt. Happy rushes in and finally forces the armored hunter to respect the threat. For a second, his gamble looks like it might crack the defense, but the hunter survives the attempt and answers with raw armored force. Happy gets thrown back hard, which proves the new weapon can scare the hunter, but not yet control him. The armored hunter turns the fight into a trap, pinning Happy where strength alone cannot solve anything. Every struggle only drives the pressure deeper, and the hunter tells him to give up while Happy gasps underneath it. This is the real test outside the arena. Happy can win exchanges, but now he has to survive a battlefield where the enemy understands how to punish endurance. Happy shakes under the assault, but he does not surrender. The armored hunter keeps crushing forward, expecting pain to make the arena survivor full, and Happy waits through the beating until one opening finally appears. Then Happy fires back with his weapon, turning the hunter's pressure against him, and proving his old instincts still work even in a world built to cage him again. On the same battlefield, the blue-clad fighter realizes the armored hunter is finally down, so the whole fight flips from survival to proof. He reaches toward the fallen green-clad fighter like the danger has passed, but his real takeaway is bigger. Happy did not just survive the armor tactics, he exposed the criminal underneath them. The blue-clad fighter gets almost offensively cheerful about it, calling the match amazing and the capture successful, then decides he can trust the other fighter completely now. He even asks if they should rush straight into another fight, which is a bold pitch to make to someone who is barely staying awake. That trust immediately becomes a chore, because the green-clad fighter admits he fought while sleepy and dumps the cleanup on him. The blue-clad fighter carries him anyway, then quietly debates leaving him behind, which tells you the victory solved the criminal problem but not the practical problem of hauling exhausted people through the aftermath. Back in Happy's part of the battlefield, the mystery of his win becomes clear. The broken spear was bait, and Happy, the former arena slave surviving freedom one ugly fight at a time, used a hidden blade to finish the armored hunter. The weapon is still buried in the body, so Happy's victory is not clean or graceful. It is pure arena improvisation with the receipt sticking out of it. Happy has won, but the cost hits him right away as he strains over the corpse and can barely pull himself together. The armored hunter is unbelievably heavy, and Happy's command is simple: stop staring and report this before the battlefield produces a new problem. The local soldiers arrive confused. Then one armored soldier recognizes Happy and gets excited that he really was bounty hunting. William, a noble family member now caught directly in the mess, asks Happy's name while handling the slain body, and then connects him to the university student who recently captured members of the Exile Clowns, the kingdom-wide criminal organization tied to major bounties. That reputation is already running ahead of Happy. To everyone else, he is becoming the university student who hunts bounties for fun and treats the Exile Clowns like a snack. Happy understands the problem immediately, because rumors turn a useful victory into a target painted on his back. And this guy already has enough problems without collecting public nicknames like loose coins. At the forest edge after Happy's win, the captain, an injured military officer trying to make sense of the aftermath, escorts the group out while noting the porter got dragged into the fight too. But when the captain studies the bodies, he sees the real problem. There is no weapon on the ground that explains the fatal stab, which means Happy's victory has left evidence that does not add up. The captain keeps that suspicion to himself as blood stains his hand, and the group moves on while someone worries the porter is badly injured. The answer is almost absurdly calm. The porter is just sleeping, which is comforting until you remember everyone else is standing in a battlefield trying to explain an invisible murder weapon. Elsewhere now, the danger behind the attack starts to take shape as a scarred man steps forward under a looming presence and admits he was ridiculed once. He apologizes over the bloody aftermath, then tells his group the important truth. They are not mere bandits, which means Happy and William have not stumbled onto a random crime. They have stepped into something organized. With Happy free but still carrying the arena on his back, the next danger shifts from survival to attention. People with power are starting to ask who helped break the order they trusted. Elsewhere now, an armed faction gathers under its leader, and the question is not whether they lost face, but who they can punish for it. The leader names William, a noble student, as the next target, which turns one messy battlefield into a political hunt. He wants William's family traced, the papers bent with bribes, and the shame paid back in blood, proving this group treats murder like office work with sharper stationery. Back in the city streets that morning, the cost of the attack lies in the open, and now the locals have to decide whether these deaths get buried or understood. Shovel Grandpa, an elderly caretaker who knows Happy, questions why the case is moving without an autopsy. But the name that stops him cold is Sagar, an arena official tied close enough to the old violence to make every answer uncomfortable. At the graveyard now, Sagar grips his shovel and talks about the kingdom like a man who knows its rules protect the wrong people. The investigator finds the detail that matters. The bruises came days before death, so these victims were not simply caught in one sudden attack. They were handled before the killing started. At Shovel Grandpa's cabin, the mood tries to shrink back into ordinary life, as Winnie, a household member helping care for the place, brings the requested herbs and stores them away. Shovel Grandpa jokes that she still has energy, then complains he will die before grandmother, and Winnie swats the worry aside like she has heard that line enough times to charge rent for it. Inside the cabin, Happy sits apart in the sunlight, still new to being treated like a person instead of a weapon. Winnie sets a bowl of herbs before him, and when he asks if it is for him too, she explains that he works hard for Shovel Grandpa, so caring for him is only fair. But that kindness hits a wall when Winnie remembers where Happy came from. She admits the arena bothers her, wonders if Happy might be involved in something bad, and the room turns colder because caring for someone does not erase the question of what his old cage trained him to do. Happy answers with a blunt fact that makes everything worse. The city had only one arena, and it recently disappeared. That means his origin is not a rumor, and when he mentions backing so strong even His Majesty's orders could not touch it, Shovel Grandpa realizes grandmother may have brought a dangerous person into their home. That night, Winnie chooses investigation over guessing, and promises to return tomorrow with answers. Elsewhere, a bearded warning reaches Sagar directly. If he keeps digging into everything, he will die soon, and the flowers in his hand make the threat feel less like bluster and more like a funeral already being planned. Outside at night, Winnie crouches in the dark, pushing past household worry into the larger conspiracy around Happy and William. The fragile peace around Happy has not broken yet, but now the people trying to protect him are stepping into the same danger that once swallowed the arena. That night at grandmother's house, the investigation catches up to everyone's exhaustion. One of them speaks softly over the sleeper and realizes he has finally crashed after several sleepless nights. Happy, the freed arena legend still learning what a home is, steps into the house with a simple hello, but his size alone turns the room tense before anyone even asks a question. Grandmother, the caretaker who took Happy in, rushes to stop the panic and explains that the person on the floor is only sleeping. The real problem is not the body on the ground. It is what the visitor has brought into the house. Someone has told him everything about Happy, including the arena pain that made his permanent grin famous for all the wrong reasons. The truth lands ugly. Happy's face is not a joke. It is damaged from years of being treated like a weapon. As the story of his suffering comes out, the scarred grin and monstrous strength stop looking like legend and start looking like evidence, which is a rough dinner topic even before anyone pours tea. Around the table, the house finally understands what grandmother has been protecting. Shock turns into a serious conversation, because Happy is not just dangerous to others, he is someone the arena already broke, and anyone judging him without that history is missing the whole wound. After the late night confession, the visitor leaves politely, but the house is not peaceful anymore. The allies now know Happy's past is tied to the same power struggle swallowing William, the noble family member accused of poisoning, so every answer they find can make them targets too. William accepts Happy's surrender, because curing him could turn the arena monster into something useful for the family elders. But when William says he finally understands why grandmother called Happy a child, the insult and the mercy twist together. Happy may be terrifying, yet the people closest to him still see a wounded boy underneath all that muscle. The fragile warmth snaps when a knife appears and Happy chooses distance instead of pretending everyone can stay together safely. He says they should each go their own way, and the silence after that hurts because freedom for Happy still looks a lot like leaving before someone else pays for him. Happy then faces the kneeling fighter and shuts down the fake meal, pushing for a real conversation instead. The kneeling fighter thanks him, but even as Happy walks away, the goodbye feels staged enough for an observer to call it pathetic acting, which means somebody in this place is still performing loyalty for an audience. Outside, after that uneasy parting, the illusion of peace breaks for good when Winnie, a household member tied to Happy's new life, receives an apology that turns into a trap. The man grabs her hand, and 3 men seize her before anyone can dress it up as a misunderstanding. A local man confronts the kidnappers and demands to know who they are, but they answer with violence instead of names. That single blow changes the situation from suspicion to open coercion. Whoever is moving against Happy's circle is willing to hurt bystanders in the street. Winnie can only ask why, because from her side this is not politics. It is a sudden punishment for getting too close to the truth. By the end, bodies are down and blood is on the ground, turning Happy's home into leverage against him before he even understands the new rules. In the street, Winnie, the household member who got pulled into Happy's trouble, is hurt while her attacker turns the beating into a lecture about status. She insists she did nothing wrong and throws the blame back at him, but that only makes him hit harder, because his real complaint is not guilt, it is that she dared to stand above the place he assigned her. The crowd watches while he laughs at the damage, which tells everyone the same ugly thing. This is not a mistake, it is a warning with witnesses. Still in the street, the local defender answers that warning with a knife and tells the 3 attackers to leave before someone loses a throat. He has courage, but courage does not make 3 enemies become one, so the fight turns on him fast and leaves him bleeding before he even understands how badly the odds were stacked. One attacker taunts him like he is a pet missing the right hardware, which is a nasty thing to say over a fresh wound, and also wildly specific. Nearby, the knife fighter hesitates while armed guards hold the space around him, and the ambush shifts from street violence into interrogation. William, a noble family member tied to the poisoning accusation, becomes the target when the interrogator presses a blade to his throat and asks who was with the young master back then. The threat is simple: answer or lose his neck, which is a very persuasive debate format. William breaks under the pressure, and the name that finally comes out is Happy, the former arena slave whose forced grin made him famous and whose freedom was supposed to buy him peace. He reveals that Happy now lives on a farm, so the secret everyone wanted turns into directions straight to the only home Happy has left. That is the turn. The attackers are no longer guessing around Happy, they have his address. At the farm, Happy looks peaceful enough to make the whole thing hurt more, feeding birds like the world has finally stopped asking him to bleed for dinner. Elsewhere, the interrogator holds a decorated straw doll and talks about giving Happy a present, but the gift is clearly bait, not kindness. William understands too late that he has handed over more than information. He has handed over Happy's fragile, ordinary life. Inside the house, the interrogator finishes with William and sends the next move toward Happy, saying the boss has likely reached the farm already. That means the violence in the street was only one hand of the trap, while the other hand is closing around Happy's family at home. The order is calm, which makes it worse, since nobody panics when they believe the trap is already working. Back at Happy's home, the threat lands where it hurts. Happy thinks of father, grandmother, and the family that saved him when freedom still felt impossible. To him, they are not just people under his roof. They are the proof that he can be more than the arena's weapon. So when the coercer tells him to follow, the cost becomes clear. Obey and become a slave again. Refuse and risk the people who protected him. Happy refuses, and that refusal matters because this is the first time the old arena habit does not win immediately. His body folds back into submission under the pressure, hands restrained and knees on the floor, but the words are already out. He does not want to go. The nobles and their agents can force him down, but they cannot pretend he walked back into the cage willingly. Happy's old slave training tries to drag him back into obedience, but this time he understands the trap before it closes. He tells himself he has to change now, because if he stays the arena's broken pet, the nobles get to own his life all over again. The noble wants this cleaned up quietly, not because he feels guilty, but because witnesses would turn his private cruelty into public trouble. So while the noble worries about an open door, Happy stops thinking like property and starts looking for the first chance to fight back. Happy takes that chance and drops the noble hard enough to flip the whole power balance in one move. The scary part is not the kick itself, it is Happy realizing the man threatening him was not some untouchable monster after all, just another coward with expensive confidence. The noble immediately trades authority for begging, promising to become a dog if Happy spares him, which is a spectacularly fast career change. Happy does spare him, but only with a cold order to get lost, proving his first act of freedom is not revenge, it is refusal. Still at the confrontation, a higher authority arrives and treats the fallen noble's mess like a failed errand, not a moral disaster. He tells Happy to move aside, which makes the new rule painfully clear. Beating one noble does not break the system that sent him. Elsewhere now, the pressure spreads beyond Happy's room and into the wider machinery around him. Men bow, move through halls, and prepare themselves for what comes next, turning this from one ugly coercion attempt into a larger crisis closing around William's side of the story. In that same widening danger, a hand tightens on a sword and the path ahead starts looking like one that can only be paid for in blood. The point is blunt. Happy's fragile peace is not being interrupted by one bad noble. It is being dragged toward a fight that will force everyone to choose a side. At William's home, Happy arrives looking for William, the noble family member tied to the poisoning accusation, and the household immediately wants to know who this strange visitor is. Happy answers with cheerful honesty, which is brave, awkward, and maybe not the best weapon in a noble doorway. William then announces he is quitting bounty hunting, and Happy reacts with real surprise, because bounty hunting has been one of the few ways people like them can force the world to pay attention. William's decision matters because it sounds like he is choosing safety, but it also threatens to leave unfinished dangers behind. The conversation turns tense when someone considers backing off because of a brother, and the household points out that bounty hunting among students is too dangerous. Happy answers with the blunt truth that always makes polite rooms malfunction: he is a slave. That single word changes how the adults hear everything. Instead of asking what Happy has survived or why William trusts him, they question how a slave could even stand near the same university world as their family, which tells Happy exactly how thin this welcome really is. The household adult pushes the insult further, asking whether Happy's master comes from a family that cannot even educate slaves properly. Then he orders Happy to disappear and stay away from William, turning protection into control with a clean, noble smile and absolutely no shame attached. Happy folds inward after that because the insult lands where the arena already left scars. He may be free in name, but respectable people still treat him like a problem to remove. Another voice tries to explain that Happy helped William as a benefactor, but the household narrows even that kindness into a cold rule about relationships between people. Inside William's house, the adult doubles down and orders the child to get lost, so the kid obeys just as a knock gives him an excuse to escape the room. But the visitor at the door is not here for polite, noble business. He asks for William, and that turns one ugly family insult into the opening move of an abduction. Inside the house now, the intruders reveal what they actually came for. William's family becomes leverage. These are exile clowns, part of the kingdom's largest criminal organization, and their plan is simple enough to fit on a blood-stained note: drag William to their base, kill the parents, and force the rest of the family to carry the threat. The child screams for mother, because the attack is no longer about etiquette or class. William's home has turned into a hostage trap, which means Happy's side now has two problems at once: rescue the kidnapped family, and survive the killers already inside the house. The killer makes the stakes disgustingly clear: stay still and he will murder everyone quickly before killing the witness too. That threat snaps something awake and Happy, because violence is the one language the arena taught him fluently, and his ruined grin returns like a warning sign nobody bothered to read. Happy moves first, and the room immediately stops belonging to the intruders. One exile clown stares at him and wonders if this is William, which is a bad read on the situation and possibly the last job performance review he gets. While the attackers reassess, one of them realizes there were two people at the scene, and that Happy is the variable ruining their clean hit. So they choose the cruel practical option and order the wife dealt with first, trying to turn Happy's protection into a weakness. But Happy is not just defending anymore. He identifies them as the ones he has hunted, and that flips the fear in the room. The exile clowns thought they were using a family to bait prey, but they have accidentally invited the arena legend into close quarters, which is a famously poor floor plan for staying alive. Happy reads the enemy's attacks and overwhelms their rhythm, so their confidence starts breaking before their bodies do. One attacker understands the problem too late. Happy can see through everything about him and swallow the whole fight, which means brute force is only the surface of what makes him terrifying. The remaining exile clowns panic as Happy takes control of the fight and pins one of them into helpless defiance. He smiles and asks when they plan to attack, then promises to tighten the noose slowly, because for once the monster from the arena is not trapped in someone else's cage. He is the cage. Happy turns the enemy's own sword dance lesson against him. The technique is supposed to keep curving without a break, so Happy stops chasing the blades and starts reading the rhythm underneath them. Once he understands that, his grin gets worse for everyone in grabbing distance, which is a very small room to make a bad decision in. Happy proves his version of the sword dance is not pretty footwork. It is a way to end the argument fast. He drives through the opening, the opponent screams, and the fight shifts from skill contest to survival problem. The wounded exile clowns changes the stakes because he cannot win the fight, so he reaches for the one weapon Happy cannot punch through. Ellie is a hostage. Now killing him might save the room but lose the girl, and Happy's victory suddenly comes with a leash attached. Happy does not waste time pretending this is still a duel. He demands Ellie's location, forces the captor to point him toward the central sewers, and heads for the rescue because the exile clowns, the kingdom's largest criminal organization, have turned a local beatdown into an abduction case. In a courtyard on the way to the sewers, a cloaked figure blocks Happy and asks why he came, which means the rescue is already tangled in someone else's plan. When the figure apologizes for a misunderstanding, Happy freezes for 1 second, because that word hits a nerve deeper than any blade. Years earlier, inside the arena, Happy remembers why being called a monster still follows him around. Even the person who raised him there used that word near the end. But William, the noble family member tied to Happy's past, saw all of him and still treated him like a person, which is a rare thing to find in a place built for killing. Back in the present, a furious ally pushes Happy on what he plans to do, and Happy finally says the quiet part out loud. This is not a match, and William is not going to survive it. The exile clowns plan to execute William in front of their own people, turning a rescue into a public warning with an audience that definitely did not buy tickets for mercy. The argument gets uglier because stopping William may mean Happy has to gamble his own life, and no one in the room likes that math. Reports start landing from the field. William has been hunting exile clowns for bounties, his fame is rising fast, and his enemies are now looking at his family as the handle they can pull. The commanders realize their mistake too late. They treated William like one dangerous man, but the exile clowns answer with a company-sized trap. Nearly 100 of them wait in the central sewers, so if Happy charges in alone, he dies. And if the forces split to protect the farm, Ellie may run out of time. The commander snaps out the only sensible plan left. Rescue the hostage fast, then regroup at the farm before the enemy can turn this into a massacre. That order matters, because everyone in this fight now knows the real problem is not just William, but the trap closing around his family. Back in the sewer tunnel, William, the young fighter chasing bounties to protect his own people, looks over the dead exile clowns and commits anyway. He came for the hunt, not mercy, which means the raid on the farm is now a live threat and not some distant warning. At the rescue site, Happy shows up for a reason bigger than competition and reaches for the woman below him because he knows delay gets people killed. He promises to save her, and that promise turns the whole room into a life or death race instead of just another brawl. Happy starts out as the stronger man, cutting through multiple attackers and refusing to give the crowd the easy win they want. But the exile clowns are not trying to duel him fair. They are trying to drag him into a killing ground, and that changes the whole fight. Then they finally get their grip on him from behind, and for a moment it looks like the rescue collapses right there. Surrounded by the wounded and boxed in by attackers, Happy is staring at the exact kind of cage he hates. Only this time, other people are trapped with him. Happy blows the restraints apart instead of going quietly, because this is the point where he stops surviving and starts deciding who lives. The room shifts instantly, the attackers lose control, and now they have to worry that the rescue is turning into a wipeout. The exile clowns adapt by going dirty, attacking in ways that avoid killing blows so they can keep the pressure on without risking their own people. Happy answers by using the disabled soldiers as cover, which forces even his enemies to admit they are losing the advantage because every swing now carries the risk of hitting their own side. Happy's eyes harden, and that is the real warning sign. He has stopped reacting and started hunting. One enemy shouts for the others to just kill him and end it, because once Happy locks in, the only thing scarier than his strength is how quickly he understands the battlefield. An assassin tries to finish the job by stabbing down at the prone target, but the fight has already widened beyond one victim. Above and around them, masked onlookers and scattered fighters make it clear this is no private ambush anymore. It is a coordinated collapse, and somebody wanted bodies on the floor. Elsewhere in the chaos, someone climbs through the opening, and another fighter drops to the ground to recover, which tells you the rescue has split into pockets of survival. That split is exactly what the enemy wants, because once the room fractures, every lane becomes a separate death sentence. Now the ambush escalates from a melee into a crossfire, as a bow comes up and an arrow rains down from above. The target braces, then another attacker dives in with blades, and suddenly the question is no longer whether Happy can win a fight, but whether he can keep anyone alive long enough to win it. At the same time, a new attacker stands over William and demands to know who he really is, which ties this chaos back to the larger feud around his name and his family. Then the floor drops out for someone near him, and the whole clash slams into the arena-level violence this story always drags back to. Happy breaks through the crush around the wounded girl because getting her out alive matters more than winning the brawl. She cries for her brother, and that single word turns this from a random rescue into a family crisis inside the arena, with Happy forcing his way forward while she can barely keep up. For a second, the fight narrows to one thing: who is strong enough to hold on when everything is falling apart? Happy's brutal reputation finally stops being a rumor and starts looking like a weapon, while the blue-eyed observer and the bound hands around him make it clear this chaos has pulled in people who are already trapped by bigger forces than just today's ambush. The ambush stops being an attack and becomes a test of whether anyone can actually stop Happy. The sniper keeps missing because Happy reacts fast enough to erase the opening every time, which means the attackers are not facing a lucky brawler anymore. They are facing a man who has spent his whole life surviving kill zones. Now in the present arena crush, Happy pushes straight through the soldiers and starts battering the line apart. He takes hits, keeps moving, and then answers with the kind of force that makes trained men panic, because once he gets momentum back, the whole battlefield starts bending around him. At the same time, the scene cracks open into something bigger than the rescue. A warrior faces a horned creature and hears a poisonous question about whether a child can blame the parents who made him this way, and the warning that follows makes the real stakes plain. This world does not just injure people, it turns them into monsters if they survive long enough. Happy and the last of the exile clowns push each other to the end, but the difference between a hired thug and an arena legend is simple. Happy survives the exchange and they don't. When the young fighter's voice rises in victory, it means the rescue has worked, but it also means the battlefield is about to attract worse company. With the exile clowns beaten, the real danger changes shape fast. The narrator warns that Happy has won, but now the kingdom's knights are coming, which turns a messy escape into a political problem, and makes plain that killing the hunters is not the same thing as getting away. Back in the arena ruin, Happy is still standing but clearly hurt, and the people with him immediately choose survival over celebration. They want to get him home and patch him up, because if the knights arrive before he can move, this rescue turns into an arrest or a slaughter. The kingdom forces arrive, led by an armored commander who instantly recognizes Happy as a problem he already knows by name. Then he sees the bodies of the exile clowns and realizes this is not a simple manhunt anymore, because Happy has just wiped out criminals the kingdom itself would normally fear. Nice work, by the way. Nothing says welcome to society like a pile of dead bounty hunters. After that, the story starts slipping out of the rescue and into memory, as if the aftermath itself is forcing everyone to ask how Happy became this dangerous. The next images keep circling that question from different angles, because the people around him are no longer just reacting to a fighter, they are trying to understand a weapon that learned to think for itself. Happy's panic and exhaustion carry him straight into the larger truth behind his life. He is not just running from one fight, he is running through a world that keeps putting walls in front of him. When he finally collapses in shock, the scene makes the cost obvious, because freedom is already asking for more of him than his body can give. The recap then widens the lens and shows what this kind of life does to everyone around it. The performances, the drinking, the ridicule, and the silent walk toward the gates all point to the same thing. People survive by swallowing shame, loss, or obsession, and none of it leaves them clean. That wider pattern lands hard when an armored man calls someone in a cage the only monster, because the kingdom keeps deciding who gets to be human and who gets locked up like an animal. Then a body drops and a face twists into laughter, which means the line between trauma and madness is already breaking somewhere off to the side. Back in the present rescue, Happy is still the center of the chaos, and someone has to drag him back to breathing before his injuries take him. One voice urges him to snap out of it, while another admits the wounds are too deep, so the fight ends with a grim truth. Winning the battle does not mean winning the right to live through it. Happy then puts the whole arena into words at last, explaining that once he understood what kind of place it was, he had to become strong enough to survive it. That is why he keeps chasing strong opponents, and the question hanging over him now is whether he is still chasing survival, or whether the arena has trained him to crave the only language it ever gave him. Back in the present, Happy has survived the arena's violence, but freedom now drags him into kingdom politics, where every offer comes with a leash. A woman warns him that accepting too much too fast will raise Lucastian's expectations, and Lucastian matters because he is the noble figure whose repayment helped turn Happy from property into a free man. That warning hits the one fear Happy cannot punch: father disappearing forever. Father is Happy's protective caregiver, the person who made freedom feel like something warmer than an unlocked door. So Happy imagines losing him as falling into a pit with no bottom. Happy refuses to let that happen, so he reaches for father and decides he will carry the danger himself. It is love, but it is also the old arena lesson sneaking back in. If pain is coming, Happy thinks he has to be the wall everyone else hides behind. Then the truth comes out softer and worse. Happy hates being left alone, and father is the only person he feels he still has. When they hold each other, Happy admits father was the warmth he could understand, basically his whole world, which is a lot to put on one exhausted parent and one very emotionally overloaded hug. But that fragile piece breaks, and the memory turns violent again. Happy rises out of the chaos alive and stunned, which means the past is not staying politely buried while the kingdom tries to dress him up as an official knight. Back in the arena chaos, Happy faces armed men instead of clean negotiations, and the kingdom's offer starts looking less like promotion and more like another cage with better furniture. He strikes his way through one opponent, so the guards stop treating this as a misunderstanding and start hunting him down. Outside the arena now, the violence spills into a chase as armed men rush Happy and the woman with him screams for him to get away. Happy chooses rescue over explanation, hauling her onto his back and running, which tells us exactly where his instincts still live. Protect first, answer questions if anyone survives long enough. When Happy is forced to fight again, he does not fight to win applause anymore, he fights to keep the woman alive. The blonde woman sees how quickly the situation turns deadly, and the red object revealed in hand becomes the next problem. Someone has brought a tool or token important enough to change the chase. Happy reaches upward as if grabbing for a way out, but the bigger meaning is harsher. Every time he tries to step into freedom, another hand pulls him back toward violence. The kingdom may call this duty, yet Happy is still being tested like a weapon before anyone treats him like a person. Later, back at the house, Happy is put to bed while two caretakers tell him to rest, and for once his body is not being repaired so he can fight again. Their concern matters because it proves the home around him is real, not just a pause between battles. Outside the house, an injured exile hides in the grass while guards patrol nearby, so the danger has followed Happy home. The bloodied bandage makes the point simple: the enemy is hurt, but hurt is not the same as gone. The hidden observer realizes the caretakers care about Happy far more than expected, and that changes how dangerous this household looks. The guards assume the injured exile will not return, but the exile is still close enough to hear that mistake being made, which is the kind of security report that ages badly before dinner. In the shadows elsewhere, sinister laughter signals that this is not just one wounded fugitive making desperate choices. Sagar, an arena official tied to Happy's old world, is warned not to act independently, which means a larger mission is already in motion. The order to Sagar makes the threat brutally clear. The objective is assassinating royalty, not saving people. When Sagar is told one more violation gets him purged, the kingdom's night politics turn into something much uglier, because Happy is walking into a system where mercy is treated like treason. Outside at night, Sagar, the arena official tied to Happy's old world, walks away from the threat instead of challenging it. That hesitation matters, because Sagar now knows the mission has crossed from politics into royal assassination, and one wrong move puts him on the chopping block too. In the royal court, a messenger arrives with his majesty's command, dragging Happy out of fugitive chaos and into official kingdom business. The royal seal names Happy Face in public, forcing everyone to treat the former arena slave as someone the crown can no longer ignore. For a man whose face got turned into a permanent grin by violence, ceremony is a strange upgrade, fancy robes and all. Inside the throne room, Happy stands before officials and guards while the royal offer lands like a trap wrapped in velvet. The official tells him to kneel, accept honor and wealth, and become a hero everyone reveres. But Happy stays silent because praise does not erase a lifetime of being owned. Still in the throne room, Happy refuses by saying he is not qualified and apologizes, which turns the crown's reward into a test of what freedom even means to him. The official lets him leave until he is ready, but the assembled kingdom hears there is no doubt about his worth. So Happy's old slave status is already colliding with royal recognition. At the same royal appointment, William, a noble family member now pulled into the kingdom's knight structure, receives his own title as a knight. His Majesty's authority praises his future while the crowd gawks at him, and William privately admits he once knew nothing about danger, night roads, or bandits, which is a brutal confession for a new knight. The man is getting promoted while still processing basic survival lessons, not exactly a relaxing first day at work. At night, William's confusion cracks open into guilt as he remembers failing to understand danger even when his family was attacked and his sister was kidnapped. Someone confronts the truth kindly but directly. William can fight, and he is among the strongest people they have seen, but strength only matters if he chooses what to do with it. That praise hits him because it turns his trauma into responsibility, instead of letting him hide behind ignorance. William decides he will not run away or hide in front of this friend anymore, which means his knighthood becomes a promise instead of just a title. The answer he gets is not pity but training, as the other person agrees to teach him everything he can, and that is probably the most useful gift in a room full of speeches. Still before the court, the backlash arrives exactly where it hurts. A noble objects that William may be acknowledged, but a former slave becoming a knight apprentice is unacceptable. The objection reveals the real battle inside the kingdom, because the crown can hand out titles, but the old hierarchy does not plan to share the table. When the furious noble draws steel and strikes the ground, the ceremony stops being symbolic and becomes dangerous. William tells him to stop, insisting this was the king's decision and not something he chose. But the attacker keeps raging over a lowly servant, receiving recognition. William endures the attack despite warnings that he could die, which proves the appointment has already trapped him between royal command and noble hatred. The kingdom has offered Happy and William a place among knights, but the price is clear. The uniform comes with enemies built in. Inside the kingdom's formal arena, His Majesty the ruler who can turn criminals and servants into knights with one order stops hiding the real test. William steps forward and accepts the sparring match, but the challenge is not about sword skill anymore. The question is whether a noble house member, accused and doubted by his own class, is worthy of the place the crown is trying to give him. Happy arrives carrying his wrapped club, and the whole argument suddenly gains the one person nobody can ignore. The angry side demands to know what this outsider is doing there, but Happy's presence proves the appointment is bigger than William alone. The crown is not just rewarding pedigree, which is exactly why the old guard looks ready to swallow a brick. His Majesty claims the decision openly. He personally acknowledged these men and brought them in, so any complaint belongs at his feet. That changes the pressure in the room, because insulting Happy and William now means challenging the king's judgment. When His Majesty asks whether anyone still has objections, the brave crowd discovers a deep love of silence. With the opposition scattered, His Majesty explains the real purpose. Happy and William are not being thrown into ordinary night work, where they will keep clashing with men who despise them. He orders them to show their faces, making their place official instead of hidden. Happy asks for one simple thing: permission to quietly watch the training, because strength is the only language he trusts enough to study. His Majesty checks whether Happy wants the same path as William, and Happy answers with genuine joy, because he made a promise to become strong together. That answer matters, since Happy is no longer fighting only to survive the next beating. For the first time, the arena monster is choosing discipline instead of being dragged into violence by a chain. Later, away from the arena, Happy's new home gives him a softer kind of shock. Grandmother, the home caregiver who treats him like family, watches him hold a baby as if every day is moving faster than her heart can keep up. The household reacts with surprise and warmth, and grandmother insists he is not a child but their treasure. For a man raised as property, being called precious might be the strangest weapon ever pointed at him. Back at the training grounds, Happy eagerly asks to return and watch the trainees, because community does not erase the only skill that kept him alive. The young fighters train under supervision, and one standout blonde trainee proves his reputation by handling heavy equipment and moving with sharp control. Happy is not being sent there to dominate them, but to learn how trained strength works when it is not built from abuse. At the training platform, the instructor breaks swordsmanship down into distance, balance, and timing, instead of raw force. The lesson clicks because the same speed can win or lose depending on when the body commits, which means technique can defeat a stronger swing before it even becomes a problem. Happy watches this like someone just explained that fighting has grammar, not just punctuation marks made of bruises. Back indoors, Happy starts learning letters, and the lesson turns into proof that his mind has been working harder than anyone gave him credit for. He uses pronunciation, sentence structure, the sun's position, direction, time, and even bread calculations to reason through each problem. When he is praised for having an academic mindset and solid basics, Happy looks stunned, because nobody in the arena ever rewarded him for thinking before hitting. Happy repeats the praise back like it might be a mistake, because being called smart lands stranger than any hit he took in the arena. The instructor ends the lesson only when night sneaks up on them, and that tells Happy something new. Learning can pull him forward so hard, he forgets the clock exists. Outside after the lesson, William, a noble family member whose name is already tied to trouble, gets a warm goodbye and an invitation to return tomorrow. He hesitates instead of answering cleanly, which makes the small kindness feel less simple than it should. Elsewhere in town that night, the herb shopkeeper shuts down after another long evening, frustrated that the days keep ending this way. When someone comes to walk him home, the moment widens the point of this place. People notice when someone is tired, and they come get him before the dark swallows the street. In the town square that same night, Happy hears the good news finally sink in around him. His rise was real enough that Shovel Grandpa had reason to summon everyone quickly. Winnie, a household member learning how to live beside Happy instead of fearing him, immediately wants to repay him. But Happy only wants to see her happy. For a man raised where rewards usually came with chains, that is a wildly suspicious amount of emotional growth for one evening. Happy still worries like a caretaker, so he tells Winnie not to overwork herself and checks whether her medicine is helping. When she says she sleeps better and is improving, the victory is quiet but huge. Happy is protecting someone with concern instead of force. At the farm gathering, Happy calls for Winnie, and she arrives confused by the sudden crowd. Shovel Grandpa, the elderly caretaker who knows Happy, explains that it is a feast, which leaves Winnie asking the obvious question: why is this celebration happening at their farm? In the marketplace near the food stalls, Shovel Grandpa brushes off praise by saying there is nothing special about caring for family. Then the truth slips out. The feast is being paid for with reward money Happy received when he became a knight apprentice, so the community is eating off the first official proof that the arena slave has been recognized as more than a weapon. The celebration turns louder, with Shovel Grandpa enjoying the feast money a little too honestly. When the crowd asks him for a toast, he uses the moment for something heavier than thanks. Happy may be free now, but his past as a slave will not disappear just because everyone is full. Shovel Grandpa makes the feast into a public line in the dirt. Happy is their family, so insulting Happy means insulting them too. That declaration gives Happy something the arena never offered, a place where his name is defended before he has to swing a fist, and when he says he is happy, it finally sounds like more than a nickname forced onto a broken face. The warmth spills over as someone invites William to eat with everyone, making the table feel open even to people carrying tension. But before William can simply join the feast, he starts to say something unfinished, and the celebration pauses on the edge of whatever truth he has been holding back. William cannot keep hiding behind the tension at the table, so he finally breaks and tells Happy he never hated him. That matters because this home is not just feeding Happy now, it is asking old resentments to stop poisoning the room. Happy accepts the moment the only way he knows how, quietly and with food still in his hands. And a simple thank you lands harder than any arena cheer. For a man raised to be useful only when he hurts people, being welcomed while doing nothing violent is almost suspiciously generous. Shovel Grandpa, the elderly caretaker who already treats Happy like family, turns that warmth into a promise. If Happy achieves something great, he will throw him a feast big enough for everyone to see. That night, Happy rests with the rare look of someone who has been given a reason to win that is not survival. Elsewhere in the arena administration, Sagar, an arena official tied to the coming event, receives the formal news that the date has been set. The peaceful house has given Happy something to protect, so the story swings back toward the public stage where his strength will be judged in front of everyone. Inside the arena, the upcoming evaluation is not treated like a friendly test. It is a spectacle built around combat, guards, and the pressure of a crowd. Happy steps toward it, knowing that if he fails, the world gets to decide he is still only an arena beast with a nicer shirt. In the throne room, His Majesty, the ruler who can turn public violence into official status, pushes the selection process forward. That means this evaluation is not just a local contest anymore. It can decide who gets recognized, promoted, or humiliated in front of the kingdom. Back at the preparation area, Winnie, a household member who refuses to let confusion sit there looking important, drags Happy away from staring at the written list. She points out the obvious problem. Glaring at words does not magically teach reading, which is rude but tragically accurate. Winnie explains that her family is handling the arena hosting, from management and equipment to meals and prize money, so this event is wrapped in money, reputation, and logistics. Happy is not walking into a random brawl. He is entering a machine with rules, paperwork, and people who already think they know where he belongs. The talk around the fighters turns ugly when one competitor gets mocked for taking a beating and throwing a desperate punch out of wounded pride. William hears that weakness being laughed at, and instead of backing away, his pride catches fire. Happy gets dismissed as someone who will not even qualify for evaluation, which tells him the gatekeepers are not measuring only skill, they are measuring status and assumptions. So when Happy offers William a gift and William rejects it, the real issue is not the object. It is William refusing to feel pitied before the test even begins. Happy changes tactics and offers William something he can accept: controlled combat, a chance to turn pride into practice. When Happy says they should create a beautiful picture, he is basically dressing up a sparring session in fancy words, which is considerate and also deeply weird from a man built like a walking warning sign. But the others warn Happy that if the examiners already plan to look down on him, passing cleanly may not be enough. The question becomes simple and nasty. Can Happy beat the test itself, not just the person standing in front of him? Happy celebrates scraping through by a single point, which proves the warning was not paranoia. He wins, but the margin is so thin that the system still gets to pretend it was being fair while nearly shutting him out. William's accusation follows immediately. He tells his father Happy must have cheated because Happy could not even read. That sting reveals the new cage around Happy, because even when he earns a result, people can still attack the gap in his education instead of accepting his effort. Around them, another observer questions whether that guy is seriously practicing to participate in the evaluation, and the doubt spreads before the next test even begins. Happy has gained a home, a reason to try, and one narrow victory, but now he has to prove he belongs to people who have already started laughing at the idea. During tournament preparation, Happy turns William's own staff technique into a lesson, and the watching apprentices immediately understand the insult before William does. When they point out that Happy is copying him perfectly, William realizes the praise is actually a mirror held right in front of his bad habits, which is a rough way to find out your posture has been gossiping behind your back. Happy offers to spar with William directly, not to crush him, but to fight exactly at William's level until the test finally teaches him something useful. William doubts anyone can copy another fighter that completely, so he starts doing what proud fighters do when cornered. He looks for a flaw in the lesson instead of admitting he needs it. William attacks first to prove his instincts are sharper than Happy's imitation, but Happy turns the exchange into a correction instead of a victory lap. He points out that William wastes stamina on bad timing and invalid strikes, which means William's real opponent is not Happy yet, it is his own pride-burning energy for no reward. Happy breaks the fight down into the rule William has been missing. Movement only matters when it protects distance, reads the next choice, and sets up the answer. Once William leaves an opening, Happy does not chase the flashy option. He chooses the clean counter that proves he understands the whole exchange better than the student who invented the form. William catches the trick too late and realizes Happy disguised a thrust behind the threat of a slash, turning William's confidence into a lesson with a bruise attached. Happy's grin spreads into that old arena joy as he marks another win, but the important change is William going quiet, because for the first time he has to think instead of complain. Later at the apprentice evaluation grounds, the sparring lesson stops being private because observers start measuring Happy against the kingdom's standards. One observer admits that if Happy really defeated exile clowns, the largest criminal organization spread throughout the kingdom, then his skill may be enough to justify knight recognition, even if nobody here looks excited to say that out loud. The test begins, and Happy has to prove his value in front of people who still treat him like a problem wearing a candidate's uniform. He settles into the fight, absorbs the pressure, and keeps moving through the exchange, which forces the spectators to ask the question that matters most: whether the arena-born slave they doubted is actually far beyond this room's expectations. Happy answers the evaluation pressure the only way the arena ever taught him. He holds the line, takes the attack head-on, and forces his opponent to prove he can actually move him. By the end, even the person watching admits keeping up with Happy is hard, which means the room's neat little ranking system is already starting to sweat through its collar. But the official judgment refuses to give Happy the clean victory he needs, brushing him off as neither exceptional nor especially strong. That matters because Happy is not just fighting a sparring partner now. He is fighting the idea that a former slave can never be more than a brute with good timing. So when the match turns ugly and Happy bites into the exchange instead of playing polite swordsman, the crowd finally understands why arena survivors scare trained fighters. He is not trying to look refined. He is trying to win under rules made by people who never had to survive without rules. William, the noble family member shadowed by a poisoning accusation, reads the fight differently from the people gawking at it. He admits he wanted Happy to go all out, and that one confession flips the match from a test of technique into a test of what Happy has been hiding under all that restraint. The observers start catching up. William has not been flailing. He has been performing a careful trap while everyone else watched the noise. He forced the fight into movement, kept pressuring the same ankle, and made his opponent plant the left foot again and again until the pattern finally exposes itself. At the evaluation grounds, the mood shifts because the fighters are no longer pretending this is a clean lesson. One challenger practically drools over the chance to dismantle his opponent, while another refuses to admit Happy has earned respect, calling him trash as if volume can replace evidence. That insult lands exactly where the hidden prejudice lives. Happy can outperform expectations, but people still reach for his slave past when they want to shrink him. The answer is not an argument, so the match becomes the proof, and the only question left is whether the doubters will accept what happens in front of them. A male advisor cuts through the noise and tells the doubted fighter to show proof so obvious nobody can talk around it. He names the real obstacle plainly. Society still sees Happy through the label of slave, and this stage is a rare chance to make that prejudice look ridiculous in public. So the arena becomes Happy's stage, not because it is kind to him, but because it is the one language every snob in the room is forced to understand. When someone notes that he actually listened during training, it matters. Happy is not just raw strength anymore. He is learning how to turn discipline into a weapon. Then the evaluation cracks open into opportunity as a man excitedly announces that the path is open and 1,000,000 bonus points are waiting. A younger climber pops in from below and slams into the moment on a rope, which is a very loud way to say the test has just stopped being orderly. In the arena, the rope test turns ugly fast. A young apprentice fights his way upward, while the bearded examiner above him makes every inch feel like a punishment. The question is no longer whether the kid can climb, but whether he can keep thinking while his body is screaming for a refund. Down on the arena floor, the masked figure and the young man are judged in front of everyone, so the evaluation becomes public humiliation or public proof. The older evaluator measures both heart and head, then declares a perfect score, which means the apprentices are not just surviving the test, they are starting to break its expectations. That perfect score pushes the bearded examiner past comfort, but the signal goes up anyway, so the trial continues instead of backing off. The young man takes the pain personally, curses the pale figure, and decides he will answer the insult with results, which is a very apprentice way to say his judgment has left the building. William, the noble family member tied to the wider house politics, realizes his training was designed for a moment exactly like this. Expect the opponent to relax, then punish that mistake. So he stops acting like a student begging to pass and attacks like someone trying to prove he belongs in the same arena as monsters. Watching fighters notice the problem immediately. William does not move like an apprentice anymore. He has the advantage, his staff work is clean, and the opponent gets driven back hard enough that the crowd has to rethink what this evaluation is really measuring. But then William hesitates instead of ending it, and that mercy confuses the arena more than the beating did. A helper calls the fallen fighter a friend. An observer asks why William will not finish him, and the answer hanging over the match is simple. Winning here may not be the same thing as becoming worthy. The observer catches on. William has the talent, confidence, and body for combat, but he keeps pulling himself back when victory is already in reach. That restraint makes him harder to judge, because the tournament wants results while William is acting like there should still be rules inside a place built to erase them. William finally drops the staff where it ends the matter without turning the opponent into a corpse. When he says he did what he could, the collapsed fighter on the ground proves the point. William wins, but he refuses to let the arena decide what kind of winner he has to be. The authority above the arena condemns that kind of behavior, warning that it lowers both the fighter and the Knight Order. But the calm answer from below cuts deeper than the scolding. Just winning is not enough, which turns the evaluation from a strength contest into an argument over what knights are supposed to become. In the rain-soaked memory behind that conviction, 3 hands come together one by one, turning victory into a promise shared by people rather than a trophy grabbed alone. That matters because this tournament is now testing whether these candidates can protect something together, not merely flatten whoever stands in front of them. Back in the arena, the verdict is blunt. The evaluation tournament has become complete chaos. A determined speaker pushes the cause even further and says the system has to be overturned, starting with education. So when 2 figures face each other before the crowd, the next fight is no longer just about points, it is about who gets to define the future knights. Back at the evaluation tournament, Happy has earned attention he never asked for, and the next test asks whether an arena-born survivor can fit inside a knightly system that judges form as much as results. The blonde examiner gives the order to begin and invites Happy to come at him with everything, which turns the duel into a public question. Can raw survival instincts stand beside official training? Happy answers with force, but the examiner's staff stops him cold and sends him flying back before he can turn strength into control. That matters because Happy is not losing to power here. He is running into discipline, the one language the arena never bothered teaching him. The fight tightens into sword range, and Happy gets boxed in with no clean escape, so the duel becomes less about hitting harder and more about making a choice under pressure. His sword technique is rushed and unfinished, but he still raises it and refuses to be treated like a charity case, which is very Happy. Handed a textbook problem, he tries to solve it with a door-sized answer. The examiner reads Happy's movement and recognizes the problem immediately. The form is almost too perfect, the sort of polished swordsmanship taught inside the Knight Order. But that perfection also exposes its weakness, because a copied style can look flawless right up until real violence asks it to improvise. Happy checks if the blonde examiner is okay, and for 1 second it almost looks like the fight has softened. Then Happy uses that opening to finish the exchange, proving he has learned manners, yes, but not the part where a duel politely waits for everyone to feel emotionally ready. Happy grins after the final blow, and the commentary points out the crucial detail. The examiner had already dropped his sword. Happy then grabs the examiner's hand, so the victory lands awkwardly, half sportsmanship and half reminder that Happy's idea of fairness was built in a place where surviving the moment mattered more than matching etiquette. The explanation follows. Perfect technique and flawless movement can become a trap when every soldier repeats the same stance every day. Happy's ugly, unexpected choice wins because predictable training breaks the moment someone refuses to behave like the practice dummy. The aftermath leaves the defeated side shaken, because this was not only a loss, it was proof that the tournament's neat categories cannot explain Happy. He apologizes to William, the noble family member tied to the poisoning accusation, and admits he fought his own way, which means he is choosing instinct over the path others prepared for him. Away from the arena, in a quiet field, an older man and a younger man sit together as the tournament's noise gives way to what people are doing because of Happy. The shift matters because his violence is no longer staying inside the ring. It is pulling homes, memories, and loyalties into its orbit. At home before the tournament ceremony, Winnie, a household member who looks up to Happy, panics over what to wear because she wants to cheer for him specifically. When she clarifies she means brother Happy, not another brother. It shows how far he has come from being arena property. Someone is now treating his match like a family event, wardrobe crisis included. At the cemetery, Happy questions Shovel Grandpa, the elderly caretaker who knows him. After noticing something that does not fit, his suspicion turns the story away from simple tournament drama and toward buried evidence, because graves are not where harmless coincidences usually go to retire. In a hidden memory tied to those cemetery clues, Lucastian, the late lord whose repayment once helped give Happy freedom, hears a masked figure call his name. The masked figure seizes or strikes Lucastian, which turns Happy's past from a debt of gratitude into a warning that the people behind his freedom may also be tied to the forces manipulating the kingdom now. In the hidden memory, Lucastian, the late lord whose repayment once helped free Happy, realizes the masked culprit is not just cleaning up a murder. Lucastian demands to know who this we is if his majesty already closed the case, and the answer is ugly. The culprit thinks Lucastian and his allies touched the evidence first and ruined the whole cover-up. Still inside that memory, Shovel Grandpa, the elderly caretaker who knows Happy, explains why the crime never stayed buried. A royal corpse and a steered investigation kept the case alive, which means Happy's old freedom debt now points straight into a royal conspiracy, not a harmless old favor with paperwork attached. The questioning turns sharper when the helmeted interrogator asks who really hunted the royal if Lucastian's side did not. The witness gives the name that changes the whole trail, Kalina, an outsider who came specifically asking to join the plot to kill his majesty. Years earlier, around the conspiracy itself, Kalina is treated less like a person and more like a dangerous tool somebody might point at the throne. The talk of letting Kalina join leads into the worst piece of evidence yet. A victim gets dragged through sewers, stripped of identity, and sold into the arena, which ties royal violence directly to the machine that made Happy. Inside that same ugly chain of events, a child insists he is royal while adults argue over pedigree marks and whether this is a shop. That word lands cold, because for Happy, the slave market was not history in a book, it was the doorway into a life where a child could be priced, moved, and renamed with a straight face. Back in the investigation thread, the obvious question finally gets asked. Why is Kalina targeting the royal family at all? The officer can only guess at revenge, a contract, or espionage, since Kalina gives them nothing, and that silence makes Kalina more dangerous than any confession. In Kalina's own remembered darkness, the instruction is brutally simple: kill when hungry. Kalina sits alone with that command hanging over everything, and the story's real horror sharpens, because Happy may not be the only person the kingdom turned into a weapon and then pretended not to recognize. Elsewhere, the mystery breaks back into violence as a knight with a chain weapon tests an opponent who refuses to fold. The exchange matters less for the metal and more for the reaction. When the fighter recognizes the face in front of him, the fight stops being routine and becomes personal. In that same confrontation, the fighter needles the masked figure by asking whether self-harm is a hobby, which is one way to open negotiations if diplomacy has already left the building. Kalina touches the masked figure's armor, but the masked figure doubts Kalina can pull off the plan, and Kalina answers with distrust, so their alliance looks less like loyalty and more like two knives sharing a table. The masked figure accepts that distrust and makes the offer concrete by handing Kalina a knife. Then the masked figure orders Kalina to follow, and when Kalina questions whether this person is a cult leader, the answer arrives through pain instead of explanation. As Kalina collapses, proving the cult trail is not rumor anymore, it is control. Back with the masked figure and Kalina, the terror turns personal when he stops treating her like a prisoner and accepts her as if she belongs to him. Then he points her toward an even stranger answer, and Kalina freezes on one word, son, because the cult trail has suddenly dragged a child into the center of it. Kalina chooses to stay until tournament day, which means she is not just surviving the masked figure now, she is waiting for whatever he plans to reveal there. Even the masked figure seems caught off guard, and that is the problem with handing people knives and secrets. Sometimes they develop schedules. Elsewhere, as tournament preparations tighten, officials panic over the ceremony being defiled and start hunting for a way to stop the damage before it becomes public shame. The proposal immediately angers the nobles because to them the tournament is not just entertainment, it is status with seating arrangements. One official pushes back by reminding them that they are alive because of the very person being dismissed, so his family deserves recognition instead of scorn. That argument cracks open the real issue. The ceremony is becoming a battlefield over who gets credit, who gets buried, and who gets exposed. Then Happy's name surfaces and the room realizes this is not a harmless nobody being honored. Happy, the male arena legend raised from slavery into violence, is the same champion who once seemed too broken to fight, then suddenly beheaded 3 mercenaries and rewrote what people thought a slave could survive. In another room, 3 men arrive carrying fresh gossip, and one of them claims his son overheard the captain, a military officer already tied to the kingdom's troubles. The rumor matters because Happy's fame has been deliberately buried. After he nearly got executed during the royal death incident, people kept quiet so his name would not become a death sentence twice. On tournament day, the hiding ends whether Happy is ready or not. Combat begins under everyone's eyes, and the first victory only makes the nobles louder, which means this ceremony is now doing exactly what everyone feared, turning Happy's concealed past into public fuel. Away from the official noise, 2 companions agree to go through with their own plan and celebrate it out in the open. Whatever they are preparing, they treat it like a small victory before the tournament swallows the day, complete with raised arms and 0 indoor voices. Outside in the field, the mood softens as they gather ingredients together and laugh over the little haul. For Happy, this kind of peace matters because freedom is still new to him, and picking things up for dinner is a long way from surviving a cage by breaking people. The smaller companion finally admits the real reason for the outing. They wanted to play with brother Happy. That simple confession lands harder than any noble speech, because Happy is being treated like family instead of a weapon, and he does not have many places in the world where that happens. Then Ellie, a young companion who has been spending time with Happy, has to leave because her family calls her home. Happy says goodbye, receives wishes for safe travel, and hears that Ellie's relative will return dressed up to cheer at tomorrow's tournament, which turns the event into something personal instead of merely political. When someone asks Happy about the tournament, he says he feels happy because everyone will be watching. That is the fragile heart of this moment. The arena once watched him bleed for sport, but tomorrow the people around him may watch because they want him to come back standing. Elsewhere, the warmth breaks as someone kneels and pulls a dark object from the ground, dragging the story back towards secrets that refuse to stay buried. A bloodied figure sits with dirt on him and speaks with numb distance, remembering people who hated him leaving with unreadable faces, as if even their hatred had lost its meaning. In that same dark thread, a blonde woman holds a dark-haired woman close and says that is why she likes it, turning pain into something disturbingly intimate. Then the story cuts to a rural house where a messenger knocks and a voice asks who is there. So the next threat does not arrive with armies first. It arrives at the door. At the rural house, the messenger finally explains why he came. Lucastian, the late noble tied to Happy's freedom, left behind a letter for him. The old arena still has one last hand on Happy's life, and it is polite enough to knock before making things worse. The blonde household member tries to protect Happy's new status by saying he is no longer a slave. He is a knight apprentice now. But the messenger refuses to hand the letter to anyone else, which means Lucastian's message is not household news. It is something meant to land directly on Happy and only Happy. At the tournament arena, 1 hour before the event, the kingdom gathers to celebrate strength, which is exactly the sort of place Happy understands too well. His Majesty, the ruler watching over the tournament, notices the princes and princesses are missing, and that small absence quietly turns the festival into a problem with armor on. On the tournament grounds, a fully armed knight studies the fighters while Happy stands among the chosen contenders. No longer a slave in a pit, but still being measured for violence. The title changed, the audience got fancier, and the job description stayed suspiciously punch-shaped. From the viewing area, Happy gets called out like family, and Grandmother, his home caregiver, appears with Shovel Grandpa, the elderly caretaker who knows him. For Happy, this matters because the people who made freedom feel real are now close enough to the arena to be dragged into whatever goes wrong there. Still at the arena, the group asks whether the tournament is about to start, but the talk shifts to the missing nobles instead. One man waves it off as an act, while an elder points out they are at the tournament grounds rather than the night order. So the story is telling us the danger is already inside the celebration. Elsewhere near the tournament grounds, a man by the window is asked if he is still sleeping, but the document in his hand says nobody important is relaxed anymore. His clenched fist and grim face turn the missing nobles from gossip into a coordinated move, the kind that starts before the crowd knows it bought tickets to a crisis. Inside a tent, a woman connects the current mess to mercenaries and an earlier farm attack, asking why someone targeted her there in the first place. The answer points back toward Happy's sudden rise as a knight, because his new rank is being treated less like an honor and more like a lever nobles can pull. The accusation hardens. Happy supposedly climbed by fake achievements, and the nobles are retaliating because they think his fame is a fraud. But someone pushes back that the target was not that kind of person, which keeps Happy's reputation in the middle of the conspiracy instead of letting the nobles write the whole story with a very expensive pen. The argument turns to William, a noble family member now tied to the darker side of this plot, as someone recalls once considering killing him before William simply walked away. When another voice challenges that belief, the charge becomes sharper. William's past ruthlessness, reports, and bounty dealings may have fed the trap now closing around the tournament. Then the pale-faced conspirator gives away what he really enjoys. Not victory, but fear. He prefers an opponent terrified enough to break before the fight begins, which tells us this is not just politics, it is cruelty wearing a plan. At the escape route, the dark-skinned guard tries to pull the pale-faced conspirator back to duty, asking where he is going when they are supposed to guard the way out. The answer is immediate violence, and the guard hits the ground because this operation cannot afford witnesses with working mouths. At the same escape route, the pale-faced conspirator says the quiet part cleanly. The guards will cause a disturbance, so every one of them has to die. Then he reveals the real objective is royal assassination, which means the tournament is no longer a contest around Happy. It is the cover for an attack on the kingdom itself. At the escape route, the pale-faced conspirator gets warned to stay inside the mission, but he flips that warning back on the guard. The guard is the one who never understood the job. To him, assassinating royalty is not enough if the kingdom still has nobles, witnesses, and escape routes left standing. His little checklist even includes food, clothes, beds, and beggar districts, which is a very tidy way to plan mass murder with travel brochure energy. Overlooking the fortress, the real argument becomes clear. One conspirator thinks a public assassination is reckless, while the pale-faced killer thinks visibility is the whole point. If he can kill in daylight in front of everyone, fear spreads faster than the bodies hit the ground. This is not a clean political strike anymore. It is a slaughter designed to make the kingdom feel helpless. Still at the escape route, the pale-faced killer attacks the masked soldier and steals proof from the mission itself. The document says Day of Slaughter, which confirms the assassination plan has expanded into a purge, but he shrugs off the warning and chooses to go anyway. That choice matters because the attackers are no longer improvising chaos. They are following orders to turn the tournament into a trap. Near the tournament grounds, another group rushes toward the event because William, a noble family member accused of poisoning, is about to become their target. One nervous attacker asks the practical question no villain wants to ask out loud. If they finish William, do they go to prison? The answer is colder than comfort, because with noble lives held hostage, the kingdom will be too busy panicking to punish them immediately. At the nobles' waiting area, the trap starts small and ugly. A noble guest notices something is wrong, gets directed away, and accepts a soldier's escort to a portable toilet, which might be the least dignified doorway into a coup ever built. The point is simple. The attackers isolate nobles one by one before anyone understands the tournament has already been hijacked. Outside the crowd, the escort reveals himself as an attacker and cuts the noble guest down, turning a private errand into the first visible proof of the coup. As the victim falls, the attacker announces the Exile Clowns, the kingdom's largest criminal organization, have come for revenge. Now the enemy has a name, and that name means this is bigger than one murderer chasing William. Back at the tournament structure, guards shout for William to come down, but the Exile Clowns already own the board. Their leader declares that all the nobles have been kidnapped, then shoves a terrified captive forward to make the threat impossible to dismiss. William is being forced into a deathmatch where refusing does not save him, it just gets hostages hurt first. Inside the tournament command area, the first reaction is disbelief, as if this could still be some staged performance. A quiet signal from the captive and the sight of multiple prisoners kill that hope fast. The kingdom's protection has failed in public, and the attackers are using the nobles as a leash around everyone in power. In the royal viewing area, a commander tells the noble guest there is no need to go down because His Majesty, the ruler of the kingdom, will handle it. His Majesty demands to know who dared arrange this prank, but the exile clowns answer with violence instead of explanation. When a captive is struck and screams to be released, the joke dies in the air. At the center of the hostage crisis, the exile clowns make the new rules plain. Send William or the nobles keep paying for his absence. That demand turns the tournament from spectacle into blackmail, and it forces the kingdom to choose between one accused noble and the lives of its own ruling class. Inside the arena, the nobles finally understand this is not a messy stunt, it is a takeover. The Exile Clowns, the kingdom-wide criminal organization behind the hostage threat, order their men to kill anyone who tries to run, which means panic itself has become part of the trap. Above the city, the people watching from safety are not really safe at all, because the violence below is forcing old fear back into the open. One white-haired hostage remembers that this kind of chaos has visited before, and nobody came out of it clean. Years earlier, away from the tournament, that same terror took the shape of 3 severed heads and a witness too shocked to process what had happened. The memory matters because today's hostage crisis is not just frightening the nobles, it is dragging their buried crimes and traumas into daylight with excellent timing and terrible manners. Back in the arena now, William, the accused noble the exile clowns demanded, is pushed into the center of the trap. The official sentence is simple. If William steps forward, he may die. But if he refuses, the captives pay for him. Years earlier, William's training suddenly stops looking like spoiled noble exercise and starts looking like preparation for exactly this nightmare. What others dismissed as a child's phase may have been William quietly learning how to survive the day everyone everyone would demand his blood. Back in the arena, William proves he is not walking into this execution empty-handed. He lands the first real turn of the match, traps his larger opponent, and the crowd's fake performance instantly becomes a real deathmatch, which is a nasty upgrade for a show nobody bought tickets for. Around the arena, the people who thought they controlled the spectacle start accusing each other, because real exile clowns were never supposed to be part of the script. That is when the scale of the disaster sharpens. This is not one noble's punishment anymore, it is an attack on the kingdom's order. Outside the arena grounds now, guards escort a robed figure away, while even the people giving orders sound unsure whether they are doing the right thing. Back near William, a woman urges him not to step forward, but his improved skill has already made retreat feel less like caution and more like abandoning everyone else to die. Back in the arena, William enters his first true life or death fight against an opponent who once overwhelmed him, so every second now tests whether his training was real or just a comforting lie. The opponent gets hold of him and punishes him hard, but William answers with a blade and forces the match to stay alive. William hits the ground, but he does not stay there, because falling here means the exile clowns win their public execution. He rises into a counterattack, forces his opponent to rethink the next move, and turns the fight from a slaughter into a contest where the accused noble might actually survive. William takes another brutal hit, but the point of the fight has changed now. He is no longer trying to look brave, he is trying to survive long enough to prove the public execution can fail. He steadies himself and keeps pressing, which forces his opponent to treat him as a real threat instead of a noble waiting to be butchered. The arena crowd starts chanting William's name, and that sound matters because it turns the match into a political problem. The exile clowns, the kingdom's largest criminal organization, wanted a clean spectacle of fear, but William is giving the crowd a survivor instead. Happy reads the fight with the instincts of a man raised in an arena, and he notices the exact shift. A trembling opponent who decides to die can suddenly become dangerous. He knows where openings appear because his whole childhood was basically a punishment-based education with terrible school supplies. The prisoners tied to the exile clowns panic and try to distance themselves from the whole disaster, claiming they only followed noble orders and demanding to leave. That excuse lands too late because the tournament is no longer just a fight, it is the cover for something much bigger. In the royal box, His Majesty the ruler watching the tournament realizes the event has stopped making sense. His advisor confirms the worst part. Nobles and royal family members have vanished, which means the attack is not aimed at one fighter, it is aimed at the state itself. His Majesty draws his sword and moves to respond, but even the chain of command is already cracking. Soldiers are assembled, commanders are missing or redirected, and the rescue effort for the kidnapped nobles begins under the ugly suspicion that the enemy planned every delay. Elsewhere in the present crisis, the coup shows its real teeth as a ruler is beaten down and left barely conscious. Guards try to keep him awake because if he collapses now, the attackers do not just win a room, they seize the story of the kingdom falling. The defeated ruler fights to stay aware, but his enemy presses the message into him plainly. The kingdom is already conquered, and all that remains is accepting the end. That ultimatum is the real blow, because it says the violence outside is not random chaos, it is a completed takeover, revealing itself. Outside the castle now, smoke and organized troops make the scale impossible to deny. His Majesty understands these are not simple assassins, because too many traitors have moved at once without being noticed, which means the kingdom has been hollowed out from the inside. Years earlier, the roots of the present catastrophe become clearer. Faith is used as the engine that turns ordinary soldiers and civilians into a single obedient force. The stone figure standing before them matters less as a statue than as proof that belief can be weaponized, and that is a sharper blade than any sword in the arena. Back in that same buried history, a broken ruler crawls through the rain and meets the face of the faith he failed to stop. The crowd believes a demon can end all wars and build a new order, so the kingdom's old sins do not disappear, they return with worshippers, a graveyard, and a god-shaped excuse for conquest. Back in the present, Happy is no longer just learning who hurt him, he is learning that the whole kingdom was built around hiding why men like him were made. After each empire collapses, the survivors unite for the next demon threat, but the demon vanishes, leaving fear with nowhere clean to go. Even the knight who becomes exile clowns, a fugitive tied to the largest criminal organization in the kingdom, believes that demon is the one who broke him. Shovel Grandpa, the elderly caretaker who knows Happy, does not deny the story because it sounds too wild. He believes it because an entire night was crushed and barely lived. The real terror is that the vanished demon might follow the smell of blood back to them, so Shovel Grandpa advises the survivor to disappear into exile. That is not mercy so much as emergency housekeeping with a corpse problem waiting outside the door. The ruler cannot accept that panic, so he protects the kingdom by turning the surviving knight into a liar. He knows it is a monstrous choice, but fear keeps winning every vote in his head. Once the war ends, he strengthens the castle walls and executes anyone suspected of demon ties, which means the peace Happy inherits is already sitting on buried bodies. That purge gives religious groups the perfect reason to mark the kingdom as their greatest target. The kingdom takes root during an age of peace, but its foundations are full of punishments the ruler once called righteous, and now those old verdicts are coming back with interest. A wall can stop soldiers, it does a worse job against guilt with followers. In that same reckoning, Happy confronts Father, his protective parent, because hiding the truth has not protected anyone. Father has kept the old sins buried, but the cult leader, the chain-wielding arena opponent now waiting for Happy, proves the secret has already escaped. The question shifts from who lied to Happy into who has been arranging the battlefield around him. Elsewhere in the cult's stronghold, a masked leader orders the followers to gather the remaining captives and move. Sagar, the arena official tied to Happy's old life, is brought along because obedience through suffering has made him useful to them. They even offer him a reward that will protect him from the dead, which is a cheerful little gift label to put on a nightmare. Inside the cult's domain, the cost of that obedience becomes clear. Bodies are left in the dark while Sagar is pushed toward initiation instead of rescue. The leader tells him to put away emotion and accept everything, and the fortified towers and vast ceremonial hall make the message plain. This faith is not praying for power, it is processing people into tools. Sagar is not walking into a chapel, he is walking into a machine with nicer ceilings. Inside the ceremonial hall, the leader greets Sagar like an expected guest, not a rescued victim. When Sagar admits he has been broken since childhood, the leader confirms the ugliest part. Even Sagar accepting the cult and coming here was planned. That truth matters, because Sagar was never merely weak or unlucky. His pain was engineered into loyalty. The cult's promise of a new world comes with immediate proof of what stands outside the door. A red-cloaked figure tells a frightened person that everything is over, then explains that the dead are pounding and wailing behind the barrier, and the undead surge hard enough to make the threat impossible to dismiss. For Happy, this means the cult is not just worshipping old disaster. It has learned how to aim it. The hall falls silent because the answer is now sitting in front of Sagar. The dead are being held back by an amulet, which means the cult can decide who lives behind the door and who gets fed to it. Sagar has been handed protection, but the price is clear: accept the leash or stand with everyone the dead are waiting to claim. Sagar is staring down a faith test disguised as a simple order: smash the amulet and pretend the dead are not at the door. He refuses because he knows that if the barrier drops, the cult does not need to win the argument. It just needs one opening to drag everyone away. The red-cloaked figure calls that fear weakness, then forces Sagar to prove whether he believes in ghosts or in the blood-soaked history that put this kingdom on edge in the first place. When Sagar finally tears the amulet apart, the whole trick flips on its head, and the figure makes him look back at the door, where the silence now matters more than the noise ever did. That silence lands like a verdict. The dead are not gone, they are being managed. And once the cult shows it can mute a horde by breaking one charm, Happy has to understand this is not blind worship anymore. It is control with a theology stapled to it. Back in the present, Happy is hit with the next ugly truth of that control, because the cult's idea of salvation is still soaked in people dying. He closes his eyes for a second, not from weakness this time, but from the memory of all the killing he has tried to leave behind. Now the story snaps into the new fight. Happy, the arena-born fighter who swore he would stop taking lives, is facing a cult leader who uses belief like a weapon. The chapter title makes the stakes plain, and Happy's first thought is the same one that has always kept him human, which is that he does not want to watch people die anymore. That is why he keeps fighting without killing, and why the arena left behind so many clean, bare-handed traces of his style. Even on the wasteland edge of memory, the logic holds: he leaves everyone alive on purpose, which means his mercy is not softness, it is strategy. Now the cult scale comes into focus, because this is not one mad group in one room. Believers are already mixed into the tournament grounds. More armed followers should be on the forest path to the kingdom. And the moment the commotion starts, Happy and his enemies are no longer dealing with a hidden sect, but a moving invasion. That brings the scene into the physical fight, where one warrior starts mocking Happy for lying about how close he is, then learns the hard way that Happy's speed makes lies unnecessary. The weapon slips into Happy's hands, and the moment he steals it back, the argument stops being about faith and turns into who actually knows how to use the thing. The warrior thinks training with that chained weapon gives him control, but Happy uses the opening to swing it first and prove the whole room wrong. One hit sends the point home. Happy is not just surviving the cult's game, he is already breaking its favorite toy. Happy is riding the high of the wind, grinning through the scars on the chain weapon like he was born with one in his hand. But the slave fighter does not stay down. He tears free and comes back swinging, because losing to Happy is apparently not a life lesson he plans to take quietly. The fight flips when the slave fighter stops trying to outmuscle Happy and just grabs him bare-handed, which is the sort of confidence that only shows up when someone has already accepted at least one bad decision. Happy still ends it by forcing the other man down, then snaps his own chains apart and proves that for him, restraint is more of a suggestion than a rule. One observer finally admits the obvious and calls Happy skilled, but Happy answers with a grin that says skill is not the point. He tells them nothing changes by explaining it, because he is not here to convert anyone. He is here to win. For a beat, Happy goes still and the story turns inward. Under the blood and noise, he is not just fighting bodies anymore. He is staring at the thing violence keeps waking up in him. Then Happy drops into submission and swears allegiance, first as servant and then as worshipper, because whatever he is seeing has already reached past fear and into devotion. The entity he bows to radiates something ecstatic and holy enough to unmake his usual smugness, which is unsettling in a way a broken jaw never is. Back in the fight, Happy uses that same chained weapon with brutal force, but the chain answers him back and throws him off balance. The point lands clean. This is not just raw strength versus raw strength. It is a battle over who controls the chain, and Happy cannot afford to lose that argument. Happy pauses long enough to notice something ugly in the rhythm of the exchange, and that is where the real fear starts. He realizes the fight keeps changing every time the weapon changes and every time their eyes meet, which means the opponent is not just matching him but reading him like a confession. Elsewhere in the Grand Chamber, Saga, the arena official who keeps tally of the impossible, reports that the dead have mixed into the fight. Father cuts that idea off immediately and says there are no dead, only belief making dead things appear, and the fact that he is bound in chains while saying it makes the whole conversation feel dangerously personal. Happy keeps reliving the dead because the fight never really leaves him. Every night the people he kills come back to face him again, and that is the curse he carries. Even his victories turn into company he never asked for. It is a grim little miracle of trauma, and his body remembers every round like it owes the ghost's rent. Back in Father's chains, the lesson gets worse, because he does not comfort Happy. He informs him that killing is a bond that never loosens. Father names the new victim as part of the same burden, which means violence here does not end people. It recruits them into memory. So the real prison is not the arena floor, it is the fact that nobody gets to leave the fight clean. Elsewhere, the story widens beyond the chamber and shows what this kind of suffering leaves behind. Two women cling to each other. One woman stands above a castle while smoke rises in the distance, and another woman holds a child toward the conflict like she is trying to protect a future that is already burning. That quiet grief matters because it shows the violence is no longer Happy's problem alone. It is chewing through the whole kingdom. When the battle resumes, Happy stops thinking like a survivor and starts fighting like a judge, cutting down enemies before they can close in and forcing the armored ones to meet him head on. He is trying to hold the line for everyone behind him, because if he slips here, the slaughter spreads past him and into the people he is supposed to protect. The fight turns ugly when a massive beast enters the equation, and suddenly Happy is not just battling a body, he is wrestling the same kind of raw force that has defined his whole life. He gets chained up, takes the beating anyway, then rips free, proving the thing that made him famous still works even when the odds are insulting. That's the point of the sequence. He is not a polished hero, he is a weapon that survives by refusing to stay pinned down. Then the scene snaps into the larger war, because all that personal struggle sits inside a kingdom already collapsing. The battlefield reports say the castle guards are down, reinforcements are finally arriving, and survivors are being pushed to safety. But the next line kills the hope fast. It is already too late to reclaim the kingdom, and the royal family is gone. In other words, the cage did not crack. It got bigger and dragged the whole country with it. Back in the present clash, the last beat lands on pure resistance, with one combatant snarling through blood and dirt as the chain between them goes taut and the whole exchange locks into a test of will. The stomp, the grimace, the pull on the chain all say the same thing. Neither side is backing off, and whatever belief brought the dead into this fight is now feeding the living their next wound. Happy finally gets the answer behind the poison that tore through the slaves at the arena. Years ago, a creature hurls lethal poison at him and the others, and the body horror is simple. Humans drop fast, which means any hope of surviving this place depends on being more stubborn than the poison itself. But Happy does not stay down, because this is the part where the arena learns he is built wrong for a normal person. He pushes back through the poison and grabs the creature, then flatly tells it he already saved the people it tried to erase. Which means his strength is not just violence anymore, it is proof that someone escaped the cage alive. Back in the fight's present, the chain battle keeps turning into a loyalty test with blood on it. One side keeps swinging even after dropping his weapon and armor, while Happy answers with raw force and a final hit that leaves somebody wrecked on the floor, because retreat was never really an option for either of them. Then the story stops pretending this is just about muscle, and reveals the real wound. Happy did not want all of this bloodshed. He only wanted to protect the farm people from the exile clowns, the biggest criminal organization in the kingdom. That matters because his strength keeps solving problems the only way it knows how, and every victory risks becoming another tragedy he has to live with. The next memory goes even darker, because Happy is shown shackled and worn down, like the arena has already decided what he is worth. A man from that world reaches out, someone tied to Cigar's faith and lies, and the accusation lands hard. The farm people are dead, no matter what Happy says, so now he has to face the possibility that his desperate hope was just another cruelty. That is when Lucastian's will starts to matter, because the Dead Lord's influence keeps pushing Happy toward a fate bigger than the arena. The scene strips away the last easy fantasy of freedom and points him toward Frostguard, a place tied to his parents, which means his origin is not some vague mystery anymore. It is a destination with answers hidden inside it. Years before Happy ever earns a name, a terrified victim is already begging for help inside a fire-blackened slaughterhouse, and that image explains the whole kingdom in one ugly breath. People scream, power answers late, and mercy is a joke. The surviving crowd huddles in the market plaza under guard, because after that kind of violence, nobody trusts anybody, not even the people wearing uniforms. Back at the heart of the massacre, the story makes the cost impossible to ignore. The royal family is gone, the nobles are dead too, and the kingdom does not just lose a battle, it loses the people who were supposed to keep the world from falling apart. That is the kind of cleanup that never really gets cleaned up. At the farmstead, a healer starts asking pointed questions about poison exposure, because this is no ordinary wound, and the wrong answer could kill someone who is already hanging on by a thread. He spells it out plain enough to chill the room. The toxin is lethal, and even a cult leader trained against poison died from it. When the caretaker pushes back and asks how the healer knows so much, Grandmother steps in and turns the conversation into family history, not comfort. She says Winnie's parents died at the hands of a religious group that rose during the war, which means this poison is not just medicine talk, it is old bloodstained memory coming back to bite them. The elder then connects the dots. Someone here is unusually sensitive to poison and knows it in disturbing detail, and that puts a real target on the person who took the dose. When the young man hears he was fully exposed to something that dangerous, the room finally understands this is not a minor scare, it is the sort of mistake that can drop a grown fighter in his tracks. A masked helper rushes in with medicine and forces the treatment through, because if they wait any longer, the poison will finish the job for them. Happy then arrives after the medicine starts wearing off, and the pain slams into him so hard that he writhes like his body is remembering every punishment the arena ever taught it. The elder immediately asks the question that matters. Did Happy learn to survive poison like this back in the arena, or is something else going on? Happy can only say it hurts like hell, which tells everyone the real issue is not bravado, but how deep the damage goes. Back in the courtyard, Captain, the injured military officer, arrives and silently takes in the mess because he has seen enough trouble to know this one has layers. The masked figure pulls him aside privately and hands over a wrapped document, and that tiny parcel suddenly matters more than the whole building because it carries Lucastian's last instructions for Happy. The explanation finally opens the bigger wound. After everyone died, a fanatical religious group stained the kingdom with blood by worshipping the monster, demon god they claim to have seen. Captain's reaction says he already suspects where this is going, because Lucastian's letter is about to turn that horror story into Happy's personal history. That is the real revelation now, and it hits like a verdict. Happy was not just born into pain, he was abandoned as a child by that demon, which means the thing tied to his origin is not some distant rumor, but the reason his life started as a wreck. So the trail does not end with poison or war crimes. It points straight toward Frostguard, where his parents and the truth about him are waiting. Years earlier, Happy is not just born unlucky. He starts life in the hands of a demon that holds him like property. That memory hangs over everything, because his whole search for family begins with being abandoned before he could even understand what family was. Back in the present, Happy finally says the thing driving him crazy. His parents were the life he wanted, and now he has enough information to stop guessing. So he sends the others to search the area while he points them toward the place he has been chasing for years, the one rulers try to bury from public history. The name is Frostguard, and it matters because it is the only lead he has on where his parents are, and why he was left behind. Earlier in the same memory trail, the old man lays out the ugly truth in a way Happy can actually hear. He was forced to fight, and that pain will stick to the people around him too. Happy takes that in without softening it, because this is the cost of being the arena's favorite monster. And the old man's final line lands like a blessing and a burden at once, since he calls Happy the ideal he wished for after a lifetime of forcing him toward violence. Still in the present, Captain quietly confirms the mission and keeps the secret close, because now this is bigger than a personal grudge. The trail to Happy's parents is no longer just a rumor in a letter. It's the next real place the group has to reach, and that means leaving the comfort of the warehouse behind. Long roads, hidden regions, and royal lies are all waiting out there, which is never a fun combination. Then the story shifts into recovery instead of tragedy for a moment, with Happy taking medicine and acting like he can just power through everything. Captain backs him up and reminds everyone that Happy is still on their side, which matters because trust is the one thing this brutal world cannot punch out of him. For once, the group has something close to a normal rhythm, even if it looks suspiciously like borrowed peace. 2 weeks pass, and the cemetery makes it clear what that peace costs. Happy stands among the dead while everyone else grieves, and the question hanging over the place is simple. How many people get left behind before this world starts calling it progress? The mourners answer that question in plain language, because they are not here for glory or revenge. They are here to remember people who were lost. One voice snaps at the scale of the burial work. Another answers that he remembers every single one, and that turns the whole graveyard into a ledger of names instead of a battlefield. It is a small mercy, but in this story, small mercies are doing heavy lifting. Outside the cemetery buildings, the mood breaks again when the group realizes Mr. Sagar was tied to a cult, and that revelation rewrites his entire role in their lives. Shovel Grandpa steps in and reframes Happy's worst-looking actions too, saying Happy tried to save the farm people and may have been swept up by circumstances rather than choice. That is the real wound here. Almost everyone in this world is guilty, used, or both, and the group has to keep moving anyway. The survivors finally stop pretending this is just grief, because one last ugly truth hangs over them. Somebody in this mess still wants everyone dead. That grim mood is the bridge out of the cemetery and into the next ugly chapter. Back at the shelter, Shovel Grandpa, the elderly caretaker who has been trying to keep this broken group moving, makes the first real choice of the day and tells Happy to leave with him. Happy follows down the cramped passage with his shovel in hand, which says everything about his life now. Even freedom still makes him carry the tools of survival. In the darkness, the past claws back in. Sagar, the arena official tied to the cult, is shown receiving control of the cult itself, and Happy is left trapped beside that memory like he can't fully outrun what the man turned his life into. Happy admits the part nobody likes hearing out loud. He does not trust the heart he has developed, because it may have been shaped by too much violence to live cleanly. That inner panic hits so hard he seems to fade out, then snaps back on the rooftop in a rush of relief, like his body itself is arguing with his conscience. On the rooftop, Shovel Grandpa tells Happy to shut up and stay quiet because there is still danger around them, but Happy pushes back, insisting the immediate threat is gone. The argument matters because it shows the old man thinking in terms of survival, while Happy is still trying to decide whether he is allowed to act like a person now. Shovel Grandpa then cuts through Happy's doubts by asking the blunt question nobody can dodge. Who is he, really? If not for Sagar, he would already be buried. Happy has no clean answer, and that silence is the point, because his entire identity has been built out of rescue, abuse, and borrowed purpose. Shovel Grandpa dismisses the idea that they should waste fear on one criminal, because the whole kingdom is already collapsing around them. He lays out the brutal new reality. The kingdom is finished, its alliances are severed, and anyone who clings to old loyalties is going to be hung as a fanatic. Lovely little civic update, really. When the old man warns that staying here will get them killed, Happy's side answers with a kind of resignation that only comes after too much loss. Everyone is dying anyway. She also refuses the cult leader's role, saying the cult runs on its own faith now, which means the old power structure is already slipping out of human hands. The woman then reveals the hidden truth her father kept from her, and Shovel Grandpa calls her idea nonsense before she names it for what it is, her survival method. That turns the argument from ideology into necessity, because everyone here is trying to stay alive with whatever broken logic they can still carry. The man's silent face says more than any speech could, because he is weighing whether survival means leaving or staying. Around him, the adults keep preparing supplies outside the shelter, and that practical motion quietly confirms that the group is no longer mourning, it is mobilizing. Now inside the shelter, Happy finally says what he has decided. He will stay. His father is shocked because the boy he raised is choosing the harder road instead of running, and that makes this less a goodbye than a commitment to stand with the people who gave him a home. Father answers with the hard truth. The kingdom has collapsed, so hope has collapsed with it. He is not trying to be cruel, he is trying to keep Happy from betting his life on ruins, which makes the disagreement feel like a fight over whether tomorrow even exists. Back in the gathered room, Princess, the allied kingdom princess, who has been watching this whole mess, finally speaks up as the group starts turning toward a new mission. One man stands ready with an axe while the word expedition lands on the table, and suddenly the question changes from mourning the dead to deciding who gets sent into the dark. The commander takes over from there and splits the survivors into two groups heading in different directions, then demands that the most trusted and combat-proven people step forward to lead them. This is the moment the plan becomes real, because the kingdom's survivors are no longer hiding in one place, they are scattering on purpose. A red tunic marked with a golden horse emblem flashes into view. Then the council lands on the most dangerous idea in the room: send Happy. The reasoning is simple and ugly, since the kingdom's blood has barely dried, and yet somebody still has to move, and the late king's will still binds them even after his majesty is gone. The final push is pure motive. The ones who have lost family and burned with revenge are now the people most willing to go. That is how this story steps out of the collapsed kingdom and into the wider world, with grief converted into a mission and Happy shoved toward whatever waits beyond the ruins. The leader stops the grieving crowd from drifting aimlessly and tells them this journey is for anyone desperate enough to walk a new path. He makes the point plain. Everyone comes for a different reason, but the kingdom needs the same thing from all of them, and this expedition is the last scrap of hope left. So he lifts the banner and turns mourning into marching orders, which is exactly how desperate plans get made. Back inside the shelter, Winnie, the household girl who keeps getting dragged into bigger trouble than she asked for, lies in bed while the adults decide her future for her. Then someone tells her to join the expedition too, and her silent pause says everything. She is not refusing, but she definitely did not get a vote. Nice little vacation plan, if your idea of vacation includes being assigned to a disaster convoy. Outside in the overgrown garden, Happy finally gets a rare moment of joy, almost like the world has not spent his entire life trying to chew him up. That does not last, because the next beat is him throwing up his hands in alarm, as the situation around him keeps changing faster than anybody can process. Freedom is still exciting, but it is also starting to look like responsibility in a nicer coat. On the cart, one of the men presses Happy on why he is acting so strangely, and the answer comes right back: stay quiet, because Happy is leaving too. That matters because this is no longer just a royal errand or a mourning procession. It is becoming a moving group of people who are all choosing to step into the unknown together. Even the cart cannot sit still long enough to pretend this is simple. Later in the rain, Happy raises his arms with the kind of relief a slave-born fighter only gets when nobody is telling him where to stand or bleed. He rides along the cart edge afterward and just stares at the land stretching out in front of him, while the others remind him that even a whole lifetime on the road would not be enough to see all of it. That is the point of the expedition now. The kingdom has collapsed, but the world has not gotten any smaller. Before sunset, the group has to become an actual traveling camp instead of a crowd with baggage, so the mounted commander orders them to prepare where they are. Then he hands out work instead of speeches, because somebody has to keep the trip from falling apart on day one. The first assignments land awkwardly, which is how you know this bunch is still learning to function as one unit. A bearded fighter calls out the obvious problem and asks why that person is even here, and the answer is practical. They bring healing, so the expedition keeps them despite the grumbling. That also exposes the real issue, because the journey is 2 days back and forth, and nobody wants to send a vulnerable person off alone either, so the group accepts the compromise even if it tastes like paperwork and bad timing. Once the arguing stops, everyone gets shoved into camp work in the open field, because survival does not care about anyone's feelings. Happy helps with the heavy gear, someone hauls valley water, and the camp slowly becomes a place where strangers learn each other's rhythms. In other words, they are not a team yet, but they are no longer acting like separate problems either. At the fire, the older man watches the newcomers settle in and notices the one thing that matters most. They are all adapting fast enough to keep going, and somehow they are already getting along. The pot starts boiling, the meal starts taking shape, and the group finally looks less like refugees and more like people who might survive the next morning. That is a small victory, but right now, small victories are doing all the heavy lifting. Nearby, one of the women reports that Captain and William are scouting ahead, which means the camp is still exposed, and nobody gets to relax for long. Then the discussion shifts toward how they will handle the next stretch, and the mood stays practical: eat together, wait for the scouts, keep moving. It is a tiny promise of normal life, and for this group that counts as almost luxurious. At the edge of the camp, someone spots a traveler approaching, and has to ask the question before the whole group tenses up. From a distance, another figure watches their firelight and movement, which means this expedition is already being noticed by whoever else is out on the road. The kingdom may be dead, but the dangers outside it are very much awake. Back on the road, after the kingdom's collapse, Happy's group has one small advantage left: the chance to live like ordinary people for a minute before the world gets ugly again. That means scavenging, sharing, and moving fast, because out here even stolen comfort comes with teeth. A little later, the scouts come back with the good news nobody wants to waste time celebrating, and the camp settles into the kind of exhausted sleep that only happens after a raid. Then they eat what they stole, which is the first real proof that this expedition is surviving on nerve, not supplies. Delicious, yes, but also deeply illegal in spirit, and probably in several actual laws. Soon after, the group spots a lone guard and immediately understands the problem. One clean hit could feed them, but one mistake gets them all killed. So they plan a coordinated ambush, with the bearded rebel taking the first swing and everyone else piling in to finish the job before the guard can call for help. Back in the wet ground beyond the camp, the guards are already moving in, so the rebels realize too late that they've been found. Happy is the one thinking a step ahead now, using the biggest rock as the best attack point, because if they have to fight, they need the ground to help them instead of swallowing them whole. The ambush detonates all at once. The rebels rush the guard, blades and axe coming down together, and for a second the whole thing looks like it might actually work, right up until the fight turns into pure chaos, and Happy starts proving he is the most dangerous thing in the group. Then Happy breaks away from the pack and slams into the bearded man so hard it stops the whole skirmish cold. The bearded man suddenly finds himself staring at two attackers, one of them masked and one of them clearly not here to play nice, and that flips the scene from a raid into a capture. With the fight decided, the bearded man folds fast and starts begging for mercy like his life depends on it, because it does. Happy does not buy the panic at face value though, and asks the real question underneath it all: are these men believers, or just another pack of opportunists using faith as cover? Happy then grabs the bearded man's patterned clothing and instantly recognizes it as belonging to the older man they saw at dinner, which means this was never a random roadside scrap. He pauses on that connection, lets the threat hang for a second, and then presses the obvious suspicion: was that man targeting them all along? Happy has the upper hand for a second, so the survivors stop talking like raiders and start talking like people who want to live. Their leader drags the captured men forward to hear the truth, and the bandits admit the ugly rule of this road: every gang claims its own stretch, and whoever grabs the loot first owns it. That confession changes everything, because this is no random ambush anymore. It is a whole highway chopped into little criminal kingdoms. The road ahead is packed with bandit camps, and one boss at the front has already claimed the best position, which means Happy is walking into someone else's turf whether he likes it or not. Once they realize how bad the situation is, the group hits the real problem. They cannot fight every gang on the road, and they do not have the bodies or supplies for a war. So Happy's dark-haired companion throws out the only sane lie left, which is to dress like bandits and pass themselves off as part of the mess. Back on the road, they sell the act by moving along the territorial boundaries instead of cutting straight through, because rival gangs will think they belong and keep their distance. The trick works even better if they come from the strongest gang side, but the dark-haired woman spots the catch right away. Only real bandits know the private signals between groups, and that gap could expose them. Then the road stops being theory and becomes a problem with hooves, dust, and too many people carrying weapons. A mounted group comes tearing through the grassland, and the first reaction is pure panic, because nobody can tell whether these newcomers are allies, enemies, or just the next gang waiting to cut them open. The horned bandit leader breaks the tension by treating the whole thing like a social problem, not a massacre, and asks which gang they belong to. That gives the bald man a chance to bluff, because if he can talk his way through the checkpoint, the expedition survives without starting the war everybody is afraid of. The bluff almost works, until a taller bandit loses his patience and spits insults instead of greetings, which is how you know discipline on this road is hanging by a thread. Another bandit even repeats what his boss always says, and that tiny detail proves these crews are organized enough to turn a misunderstanding into a bloodbath. Happy gets pulled into the front of the standoff, and now the disguise has to hold under pressure. The bandits demand to know who they are. William steps up to answer with steel, and the first serious clash tells everyone this is not a harmless detour anymore. With blades out, the bald bandit finally says the quiet part aloud. They are a newly formed gang, and they are not here to surrender their passage. That forces the other side to look at the bigger danger, because if this turns into a gang war, nobody on the road gets out clean. The spiky spiky-haired man cools things down by choosing diplomacy over pride, insisting they only want to pass through and that this is not even the bandits' territory. But the nearby camp is sitting right in front of them, which means one wrong answer here can turn a tense bluff into an all-out territorial fight. Happy's side tries to end the standoff by offering the bandits a way out, because nobody wants a road war this early in the expedition. The horned bandit leader answers with the same ugly choice, leave or die, and that silence in between tells everyone the talk is basically over. When the spiky-haired man reaches for his axe, the bandit leader proves he is not bluffing and lands the first serious hit. That instantly raises the stakes because this is no random roadside crew anymore. This is a fighter who can back up the threat and a group that may have bitten off way more than they can chew. As soon as the danger becomes real, one scout blurts out the truth. This crew sits near the top of the bandits, which means the expedition is staring at a losing fight instead of a scare tactic. The blonde woman snaps at the two men for provoking them, and now the whole group is paying for one bad ego check with a full-scale battle. Back on the road, the bandits surge forward and the expedition scrambles to turn the wagons into a makeshift wall. The old commander and the soldiers try to hold formation, because if the line breaks here, the road turns into a slaughterhouse with wheels. The defense immediately gets messy, with soldiers swinging, bracing, and getting dragged into close combat before anyone can settle the line. That matters because the bandits are not just charging blindly, they are testing every weak point until the wagon wall starts to feel a lot less like protection and a lot more like a trap. Once the panic spreads, the road fight stops looking like a clean raid and starts looking like a collapse from the inside. A dark-haired soldier nearly gets his head taken off. Another fighter gets thrown back hard, and the horn-masked attacker keeps the pressure on so the expedition cannot tell whether it is defending the cargo or just delaying the inevitable. The road fight stops being a simple ambush and turns into a full breakdown of the expedition's line. One of the maroon-clad fighters gets hammered down, which tells everyone the attackers are finding cracks fast, not just throwing bodies at the wagon. Back on the command side, the soldiers see Happy's side get wiped out and realize they cannot save the day with heroics anymore, only with formation. The captain orders them to straighten the line and hold the road, because if the enemy keeps pushing, the whole convoy gets swallowed. A hooded fighter shouts for everyone to get out, and that panic spills into the rank and file as armed men rush forward with papers in hand, trying to turn chaos into a message chain. The surviving soldiers treat it like news from a battlefield report. The target is still alive, so they need to get this back to their boss before the whole mess turns into a gang war. Elsewhere at night, the fight's meaning gets uglier than the road itself. A bald man sits alone with food, looking like someone who has run out of easy choices. Then the argument over who deserves to eat explodes into a brawl, because this group is not bonded by trust, only by whether each man can prove he is worth keeping fed. That survival logic hardens into labor and then into a raid of its own, with the group hauling stones, charging forward, and treating brute effort like a password to stay alive. They finally reach the target and go in swinging, which turns the whole exchange into a blunt lesson. If nobody protects you, you either earn your place or get trampled. The clash peaks when a stone catches the opponent clean. Happy gets dragged into the center of the violence, and the enemy answers with broad axe swings that knock bodies around him. Happy keeps coming anyway, closes the distance, and then throws the fight back at the attacker with raw force, proving he is still the kind of problem nobody can safely underestimate. The Beastman refuses to fold, and that stubbornness matters because this road is already one bad decision away from becoming a massacre. He swallows the pain, keeps his footing, and then finally gives in the only way a brute like him can, by admitting he cannot win this exchange anymore. Surrender, from a guy still flexing through the bruises, is less noble than it is practical. Back on the sandpath, the fight's aftermath turns into a tally of who is still standing and who is getting dragged out in pieces. The soldiers realize one man on their side is cutting through enemies fast enough to make the whole escort look unfair, which is great for survival and terrible for anyone hoping this stays quiet. Now the women have to decide whether to keep running or trust Happy, and that choice tells you everything about how thin their safety net really is. They settle on retreat with confidence in him, because on this road the difference between a wise withdrawal and a panicked escape is whether Happy is in front of you or behind you. The survivors from the other side show up confused, then immediately get reminded that nobody here gets to keep a clean story. What they thought was a simple escape is already collapsing into a mess of captives, panic, and people begging not to be executed for the crime of losing. Outside the wrecked wagon now, Captain, the injured military officer leading the escort, learns the road has chewed up their transport and scattered the horses, so the expedition cannot just keep marching like nothing happened. That forces the group to pivot from survival to scavenging, and the answer is ugly but useful. Hit the nearby bandit camp and take what it has before someone else does. The bandits' own prisoners keep pleading, but the crew is not here to stack corpses, just to stay alive long enough to keep moving. With the seized supplies going onto their wagon and everyone assigning themselves hauling jobs, Captain turns a disaster into a convoy, which means this road is becoming organized war instead of random violence. At the bandit camp now, the bigger question finally comes out. Who hit them hard enough to wipe them out in the first place? The answer is a fresh gang with a ridiculous name, Hellmore Bandit Gang, and that name lands like a warning that the road has attracted predators with better teeth than the ones they just robbed. The horned leader does not care about rumors, only about the loot that got stolen from him, and that makes this less a turf squabble than a gang war over who gets to control the route. He doubles down on his own strength and sends the others after the thieves, because every raider likes to pretend he is the apex predator until a real one shows up. Back with Captain's group now, a scout spots the next threat coming straight at them, and the road stops pretending to be a road at all. The gang leader mouths off to the defense force, but the mood snaps when something unseen wipes out the overconfident attackers, proving this conflict has escalated past simple bandit trash talk. The gang boss, the man trying to turn a supply raid into control of the whole route, hears that his attackers got wiped out by one person and immediately clamps the conversation shut. He already understands the real problem. If that target reaches the kingdom, this stops being a roadside robbery and becomes a war nobody can casually shrug off. At the guard post, the defenders spot the incoming group and realize too late that the first ambush missed them, which means the road has become a live trap for everyone on it. When the guards and the boss recognize Happy and the others as the Hellmore Bandit Gang, the tension flips from confusion to open hostility, because now nobody can pretend this is a harmless misunderstanding. The boss tries to hold the line by warning the Hellmore crew not to start a fight in front of the guard post, but the gang leader hides behind the alliance treaty and demands passage anyway. That is the real split in the road conflict. One side wants obedience, the other wants legitimacy, and neither is willing to back down without making a mess. Later, with the fighting dragging on and everyone running on bad decisions and no rest, the whole situation starts to look less like a clean operation and more like a collapse waiting for a nudge. That exhaustion matters, because once people are tired enough, they stop thinking like teams and start swinging like cornered animals. Now at the siege line, the bald commander pressures the masked fighter to retreat, but the answer is simple. There is nowhere left to go, so the only choice is to stand and protect what is behind them. The defenders are not grandstanding here. They are buying time for the people who would get crushed if they gave even an inch. At the same standoff, the opposing leader offers a leader's duel to avoid turning the whole place into a slaughterhouse, which sounds civilized right up until Happy speaks. He makes it clear he never came to negotiate, because from the start, he planned to kill all of them himself, and that turns the duel offer into a joke with blood on it. Happy follows that declaration with a brutal attack that shatters the idea of a fair contest, and the civilians around him react in pure panic, because they finally understand what kind of monster they are dealing with. He keeps going, even taking aim at the useless hangers-on too, which proves he is not trying to win honor here. He is trying to erase the whole opposition before they can regroup. After the violence settles, the wounded are left scrambling just to keep each other alive, and one bearded man tries to save his companion's life before the blood loss wins. The injured man, half delirious and staring into the wreckage, decides this punishment fits them because he sees their suffering as payback for the ugly things they have done. The bearded man refuses to let him talk himself out of survival and lifts him up, insisting they get treatment now, not later. That moment reveals the bond holding the group together. The wounded man remembers the bearded man always fighting to protect them, and he calls him their knight, which is a pretty heavy title to earn with nothing but bruises and bad timing. The wounded pair cling to each other for one ugly second, because that's all they have left before the next hit lands. Then the other side keeps the pressure on and turns mercy into a weakness, with Happy getting dragged straight back into the mess instead of getting the recovery everyone needs. Back in the same clash, the bearded fighter stops pretending this is a rescue and starts treating it like a punishment, calling his target an insect-like bastard before he hammers Happy down with pure force. He does not need finesse here, just enough violence to remind everyone that the arena logic still runs the room, and that is exactly the problem. In the middle of the chaos, a cloth-covered face and a horned fighter show that this is no random brawl, but a coordinated push from desperate enemies. The fight keeps narrowing into brutal close quarters, which means every hit now carries a message. If you cannot break the front line fast, you get buried under it. Outside at the troops' position, the soldiers realize the real battlefield is not the wall, but the legend of Happy himself. One masked ally bails out, because once the enemy starts treating Happy like the board's centerpiece, the smart play is to leave the rest of the trap to him and clear the board. Now the trap tightens around the fortress, with a soldier standing exposed, while the defenders on the rampart watch the whole thing go sideways. The attackers stop trying to look disciplined and start fighting like cornered animals, which is usually the moment a siege gets real expensive. At the fortress wall, one fighter throws off whatever restraint he had left and turns monstrous, because scratches and probing attacks are no longer enough to keep him alive. That transformation changes the whole duel. Now the defender is not trading blows with a man. He is trying to survive a brute who has decided restraint is for people with backup. The siege stops being a clean military problem and turns into a panic problem. When one defender gets hit hard enough to drop him, the whole line realizes the attackers are done pretending this is a normal battle, which means every exposed soldier is now a target. Back at the wall, the commander decides the answer is simple. Kill the intruder before he becomes a bigger problem. He orders the men to shoot, the soldiers rush to obey, and the crossbowman goes for the shot like his life depends on it, because it probably does. The plan immediately goes wrong, and that is what scares everyone. The archer hesitates after seeing the target still smiling. The commander snaps at him for failing, and the emblem on the chest makes the whole scene worse because now this is not just some random brute, but someone carrying a signal the defenders are supposed to recognize. Then the balance flips in the ugliest way possible. The man on the ground is no longer the one being hunted. The figure standing over him turns the moment into a warning, and the defenders are forced to face the ugly truth that hesitation is getting people killed faster than courage is. Outside the fortress, the pressure finally cracks open a path forward. One voice announces that a gate or passage has opened, and the two people nearby treat it like they have just won back a piece of the future, because for them, every unlocked door is proof the escape plan is still alive. With the bandits gone, a guide takes over and pushes the group onward before the castle chaos can swallow them too. This is the real cost of the siege. Nobody gets to stand still, because the moment one front clears, another one starts dragging everyone deeper into the mess. A different pocket of the kingdom shows what panic looks like when it reaches civilians. At a table, a bored woman complains and a man cannot even finish his thought. So the scene is already rotten before the violence starts, and then one violent swing turns the whole place from awkward to life-threatening in a heartbeat. After the attack, the survivors are reduced to survival map. One woman crawls on the floor because somebody tells her that staying low is the only way to live, and the silence from the man beside her says everything about how badly the room has broken. Back outside with the travelers, the warning gets even clearer: drop everything and leave now, or get swept into whatever disaster is closing in. The speaker starts explaining what was happening earlier, but the urgency matters more than the story, because this place is about to punish anyone who lingers. As the crisis deepens, somebody starts sealing the area shut instead of opening it up, which tells the travelers the trap is deliberate. One man asks why the doors are closing, and the answer is written in the way the other figure stares ahead with those changed eyes. Whatever is inside is no longer trying to keep anyone safe. That choice turns the last stretch into a massacre. A victim begs for mercy, but the attack keeps going anyway, and the result is a room full of wounded bodies and screaming people, which proves the same ugly lesson every faction in this kingdom keeps relearning the hard way. Once fear takes over, the weak get crushed first. Inside the cult's hideout, a terrified woman curls into the corner because she knows too much and has nowhere left to run. The people outside are already arguing over the mess inside, which means the slaughter has moved past confusion and straight into blame. Outside in the cold, one man spits out the ugly truth. The victims were believers, not lunatics, just people dragged deep enough into faith to die for it. His partner rejects that idea outright, treating faith like a cheap jacket that wears out with time, which tells you how little mercy this side plans to offer. Back inside, a woman reads sacred words while something godlike and wrong hangs behind her in the dark. And that is the real horror here. This cult does not feel like a bunch of random fanatics anymore. It has authority, doctrine, and a power base strong enough to turn belief into a weapon. Elsewhere in the same campaign, the expedition shifts from panic to method, because Happy's side cannot afford to stumble into every trap blind. They decide to hunt the demon believers one by one, using their trail to force the truth out of whoever is behind all this. And that makes the whole journey feel less like travel and more like a slow search for the throat of the beast. As the group keeps moving, the next name on the list is the king of an allied nation, which means this hunt is now colliding with royal politics. One regal figure stands waiting in Palace Stone, while another allied expedition head burns in the aftermath of chaos. And the message is simple: every kingdom tied to this crisis is getting dragged into the same fire. Back in the interrogation room, the kingdom tries to squeeze answers out of prisoners under guard because nobody trusts anyone anymore after the political collapse. The interrogator's silence says more than any speech could. He starts to understand that the people behind this are not just hiding facts, they are hiding a pattern. At the palace, an official greets Happy's party properly at last, and offers bathwater and fresh clothes before audience, which sounds polite until you remember it is also control. They are no longer being treated like wandering fighters, they are being processed as important guests, and that shift means the kingdom has decided Happy matters whether it likes him or not. Outside, the procession moves through the town and toward the arena district, dragging public attention with it like a parade nobody fully trusts. People watch from the edges because the post-king settlement is still shaky, and when a kingdom starts lining up guests for ceremonial entry, it usually means the real decisions are happening behind closed doors. The military side of the story tightens next, as the captain gives orders and his men snap to attention. Then the shock hits when they hear the apprentice knight has scars all over his body. Scars so severe they read like a battlefield map, and that instantly raises the question everyone is afraid to ask. What kind of life makes a young fighter look that broken? Somewhere between suspicion and curiosity, the bearded man watches the dark-haired figure in shadow and starts wondering if the rumors about the apprentice are not nonsense after all. That tiny doubt matters, because the kingdom keeps underestimating people like Happy right up until they become impossible to ignore. Happy's party is then escorted through the ornate corridor to the VIP quarters, because apparently even a man raised in a slave pit gets a luxury upgrade once the right people notice him. The guide leaves fresh clothes behind and moves on, and that quiet little gesture does more than the speeches did. It tells Happy he is being welcomed, watched, and measured all at once. In the VIP room, Happy stares at the comfort like it belongs to somebody else, because this is still the same boy who came from pain and expected the next hit to land at any moment. He is so overwhelmed that he passes out in the bath, which is funny for about half a second before it reminds everyone how wrecked his body really is. Back in the bath, the others realize Happy has had it rough for so long that even being cared for looks strange on him. One of them jokes that the room and treatment feel almost princess level. A joke that lands because for Happy, luxury is not normal life. It is a foreign language with excellent towels. Later, while Happy sprawls in bed like he forgot how to be a weapon for one blessed minute, someone calls his name and breaks the quiet. The response is the same thing that keeps defining him. Even after everything, Happy still puts other people's comfort before his own, and that is exactly why the people around him trust him enough to worry back. Back in the post-crisis calm, the others breathe out because the ordeal is finally over, and they note that Captain and Knight Hermit have already gone to speak with His Majesty. For Happy, that matters, because the real fight is no longer in the arena or on the road. It is now happening behind palace doors, where the kingdom decides who gets protected and who gets used. At the same time, in a brutal cutaway to the cult side of the story, a woman thanks the bearded man for taking care of her, then tries to leave, but the room answers with violence instead of permission. The bald man begs to go free, and the woman cuts him down and pins him there, which makes one thing clear: this group does not let people walk away once they know too much. The armored man steps in to put a hard rule over the bloodshed. Bandits get no courtesy, while allied nations do, and that is the difference between a corpse and a diplomatic problem. He orders the body wrapped properly and carried off later. Then the woman wavers and admits she was wrong, so even the killers in this mess know they just crossed a line they cannot pretend away. The bald man, left with nothing but fear and a chair, decides the smartest move is to stay still, which is a charmingly low bar for survival. Meanwhile, back with Happy and the others, the room goes quiet enough to make the tension obvious, because everyone is waiting to see whether the meeting with the king is going to protect them or tighten the leash. Happy asks if the business is finished, still trying to read the room instead of demanding anything for himself. The golden-haired man tells him the discussion is running long and that he should rest and speak again tomorrow, which means the official answer is delay and the unofficial answer is for now nothing has blown up yet. Back in bed in the official quarters, Happy jolts awake to a room that is far too refined to feel normal to him, and that alone tells you how far he has drifted from the life he understands. He gets up disoriented, because even safety feels suspicious when you grew up in cages. In the torchlit hallway, Happy runs into men moving in and out of the audience chamber, and one authority figure tells him to wait in his assigned place until the meeting ends. Happy does not like being managed like cargo, so he asks if something happened, only to get brushed off for asking too many questions for a mere apprentice. Happy starts back the way he came, but the final warning lands hard enough to stop the mood from staying casual. Then he reacts so sharply that even the conversation itself seems to snap, which suggests he has either noticed a threat or realized this whole arrangement is testing him more than anyone admitted. When Happy gets back, the others are already there in the next room waiting for him, and they make it plain that his absence was only temporary. They explain that the audience is over and that Knight Hermod has made a request directly to His Majesty, which means the king's post-war order is still being negotiated while everyone else stands around pretending that is normal. Happy immediately wonders if he was being tested, because that is exactly the sort of thing people with power do when they want to measure a monster without saying so out loud. The blonde-haired man apologizes, admits he only thought something bad had happened, and tells Happy to go, which leaves Happy with the usual problem. The world keeps handing him directions, but never the full truth. Outside the ruined kingdom now, Happy has gained a few days of shelter, but freedom still feels temporary because the people in power are already rearranging the board around him. While he tries to make sense of what he heard, the rulers start talking about a kingdom that no longer has a king, which means the real battle has only moved indoors. Back in the royal audience chamber, the dead king's absence turns into a political announcement, and the survivors start arguing over who the cult is, how big it really is, and what comes next. Then the grief gets personal when the men who helped defend the kingdom beg for the right to bury their dead properly, because even in a crisis, honor still matters to the people who are left alive. At dusk in the cemetery, Happy stands among the graves and feels the cost of this war in a way speeches can't soften. The dead are no longer a statistic to him. They are the proof that every victory here comes with a body count. As night settles in, the story cuts back to a small group trying to hold itself together, because surviving the kingdom's collapse means clinging to whoever is still breathing. One voice asks them to stay together a little longer, and that simple plea lands harder than any royal order ever could. Now the recap starts threading an older pain. A young man, a bald figure behind him, and a bearded man with one eye show how quickly trust in this world turns into captivity and control. By the time the red-garbed victim appears, it is clear that being cornered is not a one-time disaster here. It is the default setting. Still in that chain of memories, the young man reaches for a blonde figure, then ends up locked in a prison cell, which makes the theme brutally plain. This world keeps renaming abuse as order. That is why the white-haired figure telling Happy not to think he is alone matters so much, because companionship is one of the few things that survives the cages. The emotional fallout keeps spreading as two women hold each other together. Then 5 figures stand in formation like they are bracing for judgment. A crowned authority warns that the moment ahead will test faith itself, which means this is no longer just about surviving violence, but about whether anyone still believes the kingdom deserves saving. Elsewhere in the palace, a noblewoman stands alone, staring into nothing, and that emptiness tells you she is already running on fumes. She cannot sleep, so she chooses a walk through the corridor instead, which is usually how palace trouble starts before anyone admits it. In that corridor, a white-haired woman suddenly apologizes for looking rudely, and the panic in her voice shows how warped the rules of this place have become. The other woman demands an explanation, and the answer is so absurdly severe that it exposes the fear sitting under every polite beau in this castle. Back inside a different room, 4 bowed figures sit with their backs turned while tension keeps building around whoever just entered alone. A man leans in too close, another laughs like this is all terribly amusing, and the noblewoman's face hardens fast enough to tell you she knows she is being measured, not welcomed. Happy is pulled back into focus now, and his wide-eyed stare makes the real problem obvious. He is not just visiting the palace, he is being watched as a possible asset, threat, or royal headache. The corridor turns from quiet social theater into a test, because everyone here wants to know whether he bends to their rules or breaks them. In the palace, someone finally sees through the disguise and realizes Happy Face is not just a name, it is a warning label. That matters because the court is no longer looking at him as a simple guest. They are trying to figure out what kind of person can wear a mask like that and still make everyone nervous. Outside at the Night Order training grounds, the palace's other machine starts up. Soldiers are training hard because they are being judged, promoted, and used wherever the kingdom needs muscle. In other words, the adults in charge are not hosting a friendly drill, they are building a way to sort useful people from disposable ones. Somewhere in the palace, the real conversation turns sharp when the officials realize the apprentice they are studying is the one who killed the cult leader. That turns him from a curious newcomer into a problem with options, because now they have to decide whether he gets erased before he grows into a threat or kept around as a weapon they can point at someone else. Happy steps into that decision point himself and offers to disguise himself as the apprentice so he can judge the target firsthand. The crowned ruler accepts and keeps watching only him, which means Happy is being tested in the most dangerous way possible. Not by a fight alone, but by whether he can survive being observed by the king and still come out useful. Then the test becomes physical, and Happy has to prove he can handle an armed opponent without the palace stepping in to save face. He closes the distance, fights through the exchange, and pushes the clash into a brutal close-quarters mess, which tells everyone watching that he is not here to be politely evaluated. He is here to overwhelm whoever stands across from him. Happy enters the palace test under a king's eye, and that changes the whole fight from a simple duel into a judgment. If he looks like a brute, he becomes a problem. If he adapts, he becomes useful. So he forces the clash into ugly close range and refuses to give the court an easy answer. Back in the present, William, the noble fighter being evaluated, gets the simplest advice in the room. Use the shield, because his stamina is the weak point. He hesitates anyway, which tells you the real test is not strength, but whether he can stop thinking like a spoiled aristocrat for 10 seconds and start surviving like it matters. Now the story cuts to William's graveyard training, where a shovel, a sword, and a dead quiet field make the lesson clear. This is not fancy practice, it is survival taught over corpses. The older fighter and the boy grind through swordwork in the shadow of a massacre, and that brutal history explains why William can copy techniques so fast now, because he is learning from a place where losing actually costs lives. Back in the arena, that training starts paying off. Happy realizes too late that he underestimated the opponent in front of him, and now he has to treat the duel seriously because the other fighter is using sword form cleanly instead of trading brawling slop like everybody else. The fight then narrows to a sharper comparison. Happy looks at this duel and finds it boring beside the 5-faced enemies he has already survived, which means the danger is no longer raw violence, but whether he can stay sharp when the match feels too simple. That is exactly when the battle turns, because an opponent who seems dull can still be the one hiding real growth. William calls Happy up next, and that matters because this duel is no longer about showing off. It is about proving whether Happy can read a real opponent instead of just surviving one. Around him, the Night Order starts to panic at how cleanly they have lost, which tells everyone the same ugly truth: they did not even get a proper hit in before the matchup slipped away. The arena watchers feel the temperature jump when they realize Princess is furious, because now the loss is not just embarrassment, it is political shame in front of the wrong people. William keeps pushing the room with that smug little edge, while another soldier finally admits the obvious. There is an apprentice knight here they do not recognize, and that mystery is exactly why everybody leans in. Then the story pulls back to William's graveyard-style training, and the reason he is dangerous: he is not some loud brute, he is a fighter with scars, experience, and the kind of ugly reputation that usually comes from beating people who were supposed to be stronger. The soldiers worry because the Night Orders brought overwhelming force to this mess, but Happy has already made a career out of turning impossible odds into a joke. So this duel is really asking whether William can expose the trick behind the grin. Back in the duel, the guard's pressure finally starts paying off as he drives the fight toward a collapse, and the person in blue has to defend just to stay upright. That is the real test here. If Happy loses the rhythm, the whole crowd gets the answer they want. But if he keeps baiting them, he can make the room misunderstand him right up until the moment he strikes. Now the spectators start putting the pieces together, because somebody remembers that Happy fights this way in the arena too, fooling both his opponent and the people watching him. The opponent sees the same pattern and starts sweating for a good reason. Happy is not easing off, he is building towards something, which means the smile is doing more than taunting. It is hiding the real timing of the attack. With that cover in place, Happy finally explodes into the kind of strength that made him a legend in the arena. And now the duel stops being about whether he can endure and starts being about whether anyone can actually stop him. William answers by bracing and blocking, but the point is already clear. Happy is proving that an apprentice knight can still carry the weight of a real protector, and he is dead set on showing the kingdom that this one is not ready to fall. Happy and William keep testing each other, but the important part is not the wooden sword in William's hands. It is the ugly fact that he comes to this duel with real intelligence and a real plan. He realizes Happy is no ordinary brute, then admits the target was never the blonde knight at all, which means this fight has already escaped the level of a harmless spar. Back in the duel, William starts spelling out where that plan came from, and the answer is worse than simple guesswork. The cult has been studying the so-called hero, and Captain and William both fed that information into the same machine. That makes the match feel less like training and more like a test run for a kill order, so William stops pretending this is light practice and commits to ending it fast. William swings for a decisive finish and even goes so far as to aim for Happy's arm, because once he believes Happy is dangerous, he does not want to trade blows anymore. He wants to disable the problem. It is the kind of choice that proves he respects Happy's strength and fears it at the same time, which is bad news for anyone hoping this stays civilized. Later, the scene shifts away from the duel and into the cult side of the story, where faith is the excuse everybody keeps using while the blood keeps piling up. One figure openly complains about all that pious talk, then points out that lies are blocking Sagar from reaching his own moment of belief. So this is not just doctrine, it is a fight over who gets to shape the next generation. The argument turns nastier because the speaker admits he has already watched this world drown in despair and blood, and he wanted to hand that same faith to someone else before it vanished. That confession matters. The cult is not presented as random lunacy, but as a machine that feeds on suffering and calls it unity, which is about as comforting as a damp grave. Back in the royal side of the plot, a woman steps in with an offer to trade information, and the response from authority is cold approval to the man and dismissal to her. She accepts the order and leaves, which shows how easily useful people get shuffled aside when power decides the conversation is over. Then the story cuts into a quieter, uglier emotional wound. A woman asks a man if he is truly okay with everything, and he answers with the kind of joy that looks almost embarrassing on him. She pushes it further with a dark question about even killing him, and he still says yes, so whatever bond they have is running deeper than common sense and a lot less safely than anyone would like. That tension finally breaks into an embrace, and the woman admits that looking at him brings back someone she had forgotten her whole life. The memory hits so hard that her scarred, bleeding face and shocked stillness stop being just trauma imagery and become the real point of the scene. She is not merely remembering pain, she is remembering a missing part of herself. After that, she withdraws alone with whatever she is holding, and the loneliness is the whole message. A shadowed figure then reaches her from behind and gently touches her head, and in that final beat, the man's face turns into recognition, as if the past has finally stepped out of hiding and he understands exactly what she is to him. Years before all this, the royal family tries to soothe a terrified princess by telling her it is not her fault, but the comfort lands like a lie the room itself cannot support. The truth starts leaking through anyway. Her mother is still reaching for her, and whatever killed that bond is already inside the palace. In that same flashback, the princess learns the ugly bargain behind the walls around her. A masked intruder and the people guarding the throne make it clear that this is not a family crisis anymore, it is a takeover, and the girl is begging not to be handed over to her father, as if that alone is the sentence. A forgotten memory snaps back into place, and with it comes the real horror. The people around her were not innocent servants at all, but demons hiding under human faces. That changes the whole story from tragedy to infiltration, because now the princess is remembering not just who hurt her, but who was wearing the kingdom while they did it. Back in the ruined memory, the demons move through a kingdom that is already burning, and their leader treats the slaughter like a promise kept in advance. They swear to wait for one destined arrival and baptize the world in blood, which means this is bigger than a palace betrayal. It is a full religious war dressed up as prophecy. The panic finally breaks into open collapse as the victims realize too late what kind of enemy has been living among them. One figure bolts for survival, another watches from behind glass, and the whole place starts feeling less like a kingdom and more like a trapdoor with flags on it. From there, the kingdom's downfall spreads into the streets and the soldiers scramble to seal the damage with force. The survivors are rounded up, the allied kingdoms are treated like suspects, and the red-haired commander ends the argument by ordering everyone dragged into the dungeon, because when a court is rotting from the inside, jail is what passes for stability. Years before all this, the royal purge kicks off with soldiers sealing every exit so nobody inside the building can run. The older bearded man curses under his breath because the kingdom is no longer pretending this is justice. It is a cleanup operation. Inside the confinement area, the captives want answers more than mercy, but the interrogator only cares about one target, the apprentice knight who kidnapped the princess. Happy, still young and boxed in with the rest of them, can only ask why this is happening, because the people in charge have already decided guilt first and facts later. A frightened captive tries to resist being dragged off, but the guards keep tightening the net around everyone connected to the incident. That is the real danger here. Once the kingdom starts calling people suspects, innocence stops being a shield and becomes a joke. The blame game turns personal fast, and the woman's shock tells you she is not hearing the story the way the accuser wants it told. When she fires back that it was all his doing, the conversation stops being about one rescue and starts looking like a betrayal that has been boiling for a long time. The man answers with force, not because he has proof, but because he wants obedience more than truth. He restrains her hard enough to make the power imbalance obvious, and his line about her hatred makes it clear he knows this is not a simple misunderstanding. Back in the arena courtyard, the public face of the kingdom is still standing, which makes the rot behind it even uglier. Everyone is gathered as if this is a lawful proceeding, but it already feels like a ritual sacrifice with better architecture. Then the truth of the larger conspiracy lands. Happy realizes the king is standing with the cult leader's son, which means an allied kingdom is already compromised from the top. The woman even greets him like someone she knows, but the king's confusion shows the room is splitting into factions right in front of him. She finally admits she has been thinking about switching sides, and that confession turns the whole meeting into a knife fight without the knife. Happy watches from outside the gates as the king orders her away from him, because the throne no longer trusts love, loyalty, or anything else that might complicate control. Years before all this, the royal arena is already turning into a political trap, and the king tries to pull the woman away before the room tears itself in two. She and the man catch each other's eyes as they're separated, which tells Happy this is not just a fight, it's a betrayal with history behind it. The woman acts almost pleased by the chaos and then drops straight into violence, using the break in attention to strike first. Her opponent is forced into close combat immediately, because in this place hesitation gets you killed and everybody knows it. The clash widens fast when the horned fighter joins in with his curved weapon, and the whole exchange turns into a public proof that the arena is full of people hiding power behind title. Nearby, two men watch in disbelief because even they can tell this is no ordinary match anymore. As Happy scans the killing ground, he does what he always does first. He looks for an exit, because freedom only matters if there's still a way out. He admits the truth of his survival instinct plainly, which is that if he sees a key, he steals it without asking questions. That tiny habit says everything about him and the world he comes from. Inside the arena, the next round starts with 4 fighters advancing in formation, but the woman is already smiling like she's found the weak point in the whole setup. The crown-headed man reacts in shock, because he can see this is about to go sideways and he cannot stop it. The woman's hidden brutality finally comes into focus when her eyes flare with a pink glow, and she stands over fallen armored opponents, like the arena just made a bad investment. The aftermath leaves no doubt that she is not here to survive by manners, only by outlasting everyone else. Now the guards hand out weapons as if that somehow counts as fairness, and the fighters rush the chance before it disappears. That only makes the room more dangerous, because once everybody is armed, the whole arena becomes a free-for-all with rules written in blood. The blonde fighter thinks he has finally forced the woman onto the defensive, and for a moment she even questions the strange despair and demon voice business they keep throwing at her. But then she snaps right back into the brawl, because whatever fear this place is trying to teach her, she is not built to fold under it. The man answers with a clean hit of his own, and the exchange proves she can be rattled even if she refuses to break. She swats away his taunting and keeps swinging, which only makes the duel nastier. Then she powers through him, lands the decisive blow, and leaves him with the one thing this arena understands best, a reminder that raw strength still decides who lives through the day. Even he has to admit it, because the guy really does have monstrous strength. Years before all this, the royal arena turns into a trap and everyone is fighting just to survive the betrayal closing in around them. The crowned enemy refuses to back down, because this is no longer a sport to him, it is a purge. Still in the past, the backline starts collapsing as a dark-skinned attacker moves on a blonde ally, and the room makes its real intention obvious. Somebody here is choosing sides, and the wrong answer gets you hit with a stick for your trouble. Happy steps in with a wooden staff, and does what he always does when politics turns ugly. He meets violence head on, but the others can see the problem immediately. The enemy's strength is too much for a straight trade, so this has to become a smarter escape, not just a louder brawl. The fight sharpens into a duel of angles and timing, because the only way out is to break the attacker's rhythm before he can pin them down. Happy, or the frontline fighter, commits to the opening, shifts the strike mid-motion, and lands the kind of hit that finally cracks the opponent's guard. Happy keeps the pressure on, because a straight brawl is the only language this room respects, but the opponent tries to smother that momentum with a grab and a desperate warning not to stop. Happy rips free, turns the hold into leverage, and the whole exchange flips from raw strength to a test of who can stay standing when the other guy starts losing his grip. Once Happy gets the opening, he hammers it home with his staff and leaves the opponent stunned enough to finally admit the truth. Brute force alone is not enough anymore. That matters because this fight is no longer about pride. It is about whether the enemy can keep calling this a fair contest after Happy starts bending the rules of strength. The next lesson lands fast. This sword style is supposed to be beyond ordinary swordsmen, which means William and Happy are being handed something that separates trained fighters from everyone else who dies in the mud. The mentor spells it out plainly. Then Happy and William take their swords seriously, because now they are chasing a technique that is not just defense or offense, but a trick that makes both useless if you read it wrong. Back in the fight, Happy uses that idea to survive a hard exchange, and when his counter lands, it is enough to send the other side crashing back hard. The reaction tells the whole story. Happy is not just swinging harder, he is learning to grow into a weapon that punishes anyone who tries to bully him at close range. Happy keeps working with the wooden staff, testing how much damage one opening can buy him, then immediately decides it is still not enough and commits to another hit. That tiny choice matters because it shows the mindset that got him out of the arena in the first place. He does not need perfect technique when he can keep forcing the problem until it breaks. The enemy finally catches on that Happy is not simply stronger, he is using their own power against them, which means every reckless trade only makes things worse. From there, the fight becomes a speed contest instead of a strength contest, and when the weapons lock up at close range, Happy realizes he cannot just keep trading forever and expect the answer to appear. Happy answers that dead end with a decisive push, and the battle widens into chaos as another fighter joins the clash, and the command to hold the rear lands on Hermod, the combat leader who has to buy everyone else time. In other words, the escape now depends on sacrifice, because someone has to stay in the fire long enough for the truth to get out alive. Back in the present fight, Happy keeps swinging through exhaustion and refuses to give the enemy a clean finish, even as the exchange gets so brutal that it starts costing him breath. When he ends up heavy and winded, the message is simple: he wins ground, but every step forward leaves him closer to the limit, and that is exactly why this escape is still hanging by a thread. Happy is still trying to break through the enemy line, but the two fighters in front of him keep smothering every opening, so he has to wrestle for control instead of landing a clean finish. He grabs one arm, carves back with his sword, and still gets shoved into the railing because this escape is turning into a pure numbers problem. Back in the arena lane, the wounded get a moment to breathe while one ally checks on them and another watches the four armed fighters still holding the choke point. Then the older fighter makes the ugly call. The exit is open, somebody has to survive long enough to warn the kingdom, and he will be the one buying that time. That is the real cost of the escape now, because getting out means leaving somebody behind in the fire. In the same battle, another warrior throws himself into a desperate mid-air hit, and the clash leaves everyone rattled enough to ask whether this was always meant to end in sacrifice. Happy is the one who says it out loud, because he sees the pattern. These men are choosing to die so the truth can reach the kingdom. Even the commander starts sounding like a man who knows peace has made him soft, which is a terrible thing to realize when the next attack is already coming. Now the commander stands his ground with both swords out and refuses to give the soldiers the easy kill they want. He declares that the kingdom matters more than his body, even if they have to pin him through with spears to prove it. And that turns the fight from panic into a last stand. It is the kind of speech that only works when a man has already decided his own life is the cheapest thing in the room. Meanwhile, Happy has slipped into a different corner of the chaos, where the fighting stops being about brute force and starts being about information. He urgently warns the woman in the armory that the enemy's elite troops are far beyond ordinary soldiers, and her fear tells him the bad news lands exactly where it should. This is not a skirmish he can simply punch his way through. When he bends to leave, she grabs him and protests that he will die, but he tears free anyway, because somebody has to go and carry the warning out alive. The enemy finally spots Happy, and the whole fight turns from chaos into a hunt. The soldiers move to grab him, but the moment they realize the incoming reinforcements are the 4th Royal Guard and the Executioner, the panic gets worse than the blade work, because now they know this is no ordinary cleanup. Happy answers the rush the only way he knows how, by hitting first and trying to break the net before it closes. It buys him a heartbeat, not a victory, because the guards answer with enough force to drop him back into chains, which proves the gap between a survivor and trained killers is still ugly business. Elsewhere in the same collapse, someone orders a regroup, but the enemy is already celebrating like the arrest means the war is over. That victory comes with a nasty little asterisk, because the capture only matters if they can keep the prisoner from slipping the leash again. Back in the palace's darker corridors, Happy gets boxed in by masked soldiers who want him dead before he can help anyone else. The fight shifts from survival to protection when one of them names him an outsider and another decides a female captive has to die, forcing Happy to choose between escape and saving her. Happy chooses the captive, and that choice changes the whole battle. He lunges, shields her, and then bursts through the pressure hard enough to prove he is still the one thing the cult cannot casually put down. That break in the fighting gives the others room to read the enemy more clearly, and Princess, the allied kingdom princess who has been watching the cult closely, spots the fanatics without missing a beat. From that recognition comes a real plan, because once she can tell zealots from everyone else, someone finally sees a path to end this mess, instead of just surviving it. With the plan set, the palace erupts into full-scale movement, as forces slam through the corridors and gather in the courtyard for the next push. The commanders look lost for a second. Princess is smiling like she knows something they do not, and that calm in the middle of armed panic tells you the counterattack has finally begun. The next clashes spread upward and outward, with allies and cultists trading blows across the palace roofline and halls as the resistance starts to take shape. But Happy pays for every second of it, because a cult member gets hold of him and drags the fight back to the one place he hates most, helpless in someone else's grip. Back in the palace courtyard, Happy is no longer just fighting for himself, because this round is about whether the people trapped here survive the cult's purge. Princess sees him in the middle of the chaos and asks if he got captured, which tells you she recognizes the danger fast and still has the nerve to talk through it. The cult leader answers that hesitation with a simple order to wipe everyone out, even the one they dragged along, because mercy has never been part of his plan. A warrior slams into him before the slaughter can spread, and for a second the fight stops being a clean execution and becomes a problem the cult did not budget for. Elsewhere in the palace, the backlash hits hard enough that one blood-covered figure recoils while another person starts asking what everyone is doing, because the room is splitting into sides faster than anyone can explain. Soldiers then box in a blonde figure with swords drawn, and the question shifts from confusion to panic. If even the armed men are aiming at her, somebody has decided she is the threat. That tension spreads through a few hard stares and half-finished reactions, the kind that say old loyalties are breaking right now. One dark-skinned man fixes his eyes on a masked figure, then somebody gets hurled upward through the mess, and the palace fight starts swallowing anyone who cannot keep up. Back with Happy, the argument turns from swords to bloodline, because the people around him start asking who the earlier man really was, and whether he was tied to a soul bargain with a demon. Happy snaps back that none of this makes sense, then the real bomb drops. He says his mother told him everything, and that means this fight has cracked open a family secret bigger than the palace siege itself. When the guards decide to settle it with a charge, Happy stops listening and starts breaking the line, because if he loses here, the captives and the truth both disappear under boot leather. He tears through the armed rush with enough force that even the authority figure watching from the edge can only stare, and the scene makes one thing painfully clear. Whatever Happy is, he is still far beyond a normal fighter. That realization corners his opponent, who finally admits the ugly possibility that Happy has been hiding his true strength all along. Happy does not waste breath denying it. He keeps coming anyway, says he will finish this here, and settles into the final strike with the cold focus of someone who has already decided that this cage ends tonight. Happy refuses to stay pinned on the edge of the fight, because if he slips now the captives and the truth both vanish under the palace boots. He hauls himself back into the struggle with one hand, then launches straight at his opponent like a man who already decided this cage is coming apart tonight. That first collision proves Happy is still operating on a different level, but his opponent learns fast and tries to answer with technique instead of panic. Happy keeps adapting in real time, breaking the rhythm with palm strikes, blade work, and a grin that says he is enjoying this far too much for the room's comfort. In the present palace fight, the real problem is not strength alone, but pride, because both sides keep trying to win by force even after it stops working. The narration makes the point plain. They keep reaching for brute power, and Happy keeps turning that habit against them until the whole exchange becomes a test of who can stop being predictable first. Happy answers that problem by changing the shape of the fight, and that shift catches his opponent off guard. He stops treating the sword like a simple weapon and starts pressing from every angle at once, which forces the other side to admit this is not the same style they were expecting and not the same man they thought they were fighting. Happy's final push lands because he abandons the safe, familiar way to fight and commits to something the enemy cannot easily read. The strike overwhelms his opponent, then the recoil throws Happy backward too, so even his victory comes with a cost. Power without control still leaves him wondering what exactly he just unleashed. Happy keeps the palace fight alive by answering power with timing, not panic. He eats a brutal hit to the torso, but instead of folding, he turns the crowd's hunger for his death against them and catches the rush before it can bury him. With the mob finally checked, Happy commits to the only thing that matters now, ending the threat fast enough to keep the captives alive. He plants himself with the staff and shovel, then explodes forward with a counterstrike so heavy it proves he has crossed from surviving to overpowering. Across the hall, a masked cult figure hears the ugly truth behind all this violence. Power only shows up when someone refuses to stay down. That realization rattles the bearded man, and the moment hesitation hits him, he gets smashed hard enough to leave blood on his clothes and his pride on the floor. In the formal hall, the noble stands over the ruined bearded man and forces him to face the lesson he never learned. The man coughs through the humiliation and finally admits he worshipped strength because he never understood the harder thing, which is standing up to despair instead of kneeling to it. Back in the war, that weakness gets people killed. A female warrior holds her ground on a battlefield soaked in bodies, and the dead soldiers become the proof of what happens when a cause is crushed before it can grow teeth. That old sacrifice mattered because those soldiers were not just dying, they were planting a future for someone they could not yet see. The fallen left behind a will strong enough to expect a successor, and now Happy is the answer they were waiting for. Even in the middle of carnage, someone out there bet on a boy with blood on his hand and absolutely no healthy hobbies. Still in the same fight, Happy has the opening now, so he goes for the finish before the enemy can recover. He raises the weapon and brings everything he has into one crushing blow. Because this battle is no longer about proving strength, it is about using it before the chance disappears. Years earlier, indoors, the story shifts to the people who taught someone else how to live with impossible choices. Mother sits with a child and makes the kind of decision that shapes a whole life, and whatever she chooses here will clearly haunt the family long after the tea goes cold. Elsewhere in the same past, a winged noble-looking man in the castle pushes that choice towards something darker. The warning lands plainly. This path leads to demons, and once that line gets crossed, nobody gets to pretend it was an accident. That same darkness spills into the wider world as a demon attacks helpless people while the crowd watches from a distance. Then the old warning closes the loop. The day this descent comes is near, and the terror of it still echoes through the survivors. Years earlier, the old violence in this world starts with a simple lesson. The young use force because that is the only language the weak ever get taught. The elder takes the punishment, and the kid who swings first learns that survival here means either breaking someone else or getting broken yourself. Back in the present, the survivors are already paying for yesterday's choices, because the castle escape has triggered the one thing nobody wanted, a pursuit squad on their heels. One soldier spells it out while the others run. If they want out, they have to move now, since the captain leading the hunt is the cruelest blade in the kingdom. That fear has a face, and it is not subtle about enjoying the job. The captain is remembered as the first soldier father brought into the kingdom, but to everyone who has seen the aftermath, he looks less like a man and more like a demon who treats dead citizens like paperwork. The pursuit turns the whole route into a running panic, with Happy finally in the middle of the chaos instead of watching it from the sidelines. As the group fights its way across the outpost, the soldiers realize the escapees have reached the outer gate, which means this is no longer a clean chase. It is a last stand with the door still open. Even while they are running for their lives, the survivors start arguing with the future, because panic always tries to sell people a disaster twice. One of them worries they will never reach their kingdom without supplies, then catches himself and admits the truth. Half the terror is just fear of something that has not happened yet. Then the chase stops being theory and becomes a direct attack, as mounted reinforcements crash in and force everyone to choose a position or die scattered. The defenders grab the stables and the wall behind them, and Happy does what he does best, which is stop talking and go straight at the biggest threat on the field. Happy lands on the mounted fighter hard enough to prove the point he has been making his whole life. If you want him gone, you have to do more than swing first. The armored rider still keeps coming, but Happy slips free, forces the exchange, and turns the chase into a personal problem for the man on horseback. At the fort wall, Captain and his soldiers realize the chase has turned into a siege, and the thing coming at them is strong enough that their swords can't even buy them space. That is the problem now. If they keep backing up, they get cut down, but if they stand still, they get run over. Back on the wall, Captain finally sees the scale of the disaster, and scrambles to organize a defense before the enemy reaches the gate. He orders his men to raise their weapons, but the panic is already spreading, because one approach has become a slaughter route, and nobody likes those odds. In the fort courtyard, a woman steps out as the one person calm enough to matter, and the soldiers recoil because she looks less like a hostage and more like a problem they can't solve. She identifies herself as not a cultist and demands the gate opened, which tells everyone she knows exactly who the real enemy is. Outside the wall, the armored knight on horseback tries to make sense of the target, but the answer comes in the worst possible way. The charge fails to scare it off. That forces the kingdom's fighters to admit they are not dealing with a normal raider, but with something stubborn enough to walk through fear and keep coming. Back in a dim room, a man studies old documents and starts piecing together the real shape of the war, because the enemy's trail does not end at the battlefield. The hidden homeland of the demons was erased from maps. Their leader abandoned his followers and went home during the war, and the people he left behind stayed armed and waiting like a grudge with legs. Inside the building, Happy learns the hard way that one cavalryman can shut down an entire room by sheer pressure alone. He is shocked by how impossible the situation is, then gets even more annoyed when he realizes the horse itself never panics, which means the rider controls the fight before the first real exchange even lands. Then Happy spots William and calls out to him with the relief of someone who has finally found an ally in the middle of a disaster. That reunion matters because Happy is no longer facing this mess alone, and if William is here, then the fight around them just got a lot more personal. Happy and William crash back into the fight with the exact level of volume a rescue mission should never have, but it works because their reunion gives both of them something to rally around. William recognizes Happy instantly, and for a second the chaos has a center again. They are together, which means neither of them has to survive this room alone. Then Happy hears Winnie, the household member who gave him a taste of normal life, has been hurt, and the relief snaps into fury. He demands to know who did it, because freedom means nothing to him if the people who made it feel real get crushed in front of him. The armored attacker turns that rage back on Happy and asks if he is the culprit, which tells Happy this is not a simple brawl anymore. The enemy is hunting for blame. Happy is hunting for the person who hurt Winnie, and both of them choose violence before anyone bothers with a proper sentence. Happy tries to read the armored fighter the way he reads every opponent, but the armor gives him nothing useful. Every opening turns into another trap, so Happy starts asking the real problem out loud. Where is he supposed to hit a walking metal wall? The armored fighter answers by overpowering him outright, and Happy gets thrown back before he can turn anger into control. That matters because Happy is used to being the monster in the room, but this thing can shove him around like furniture with terrible customer service. Happy refuses to stay down and punches back, but the armored enemy punishes him again before he can build momentum, so Happy changes the terms of the fight. If normal attacks cannot reach the truth inside that armor, he will stop holding back and force the armor to prove it can survive him. The armored fighter realizes the wound was not made by a spear at all, but by Happy's bare hands, and that discovery scares him more than the injury. Happy is not just strong, he is doing something the knight associates with his own lord's power, which turns Happy from a nuisance into a mystery with fists attached. Happy drives the counterattack hard enough to stagger the armored fighter, and the crowd finally understands this is no ordinary street disaster. Cult members and authorities gather while someone demands to know how Happy managed to single out only the believers, which means his violence has exposed the cult instead of merely adding to the mess. Elsewhere in the cult's custody, the cult leader, the chain-wielding arena enemy tied to this fanatic movement, presses a captive with a cruel question about whether their god exists. He is not trying to win an argument, he is breaking resistance, one line at a time. The cult leader then makes the threat physical, restraining the captive and ordering him to look outside with his own eyes. The point is simple and ugly. While Happy fights armored monsters in the open, the cult is already turning suffering into recruitment material. Outside the walls now, the captain learns how deep the rot goes. Half the guards were cultists, and the only reason anyone made it out is plain dumb luck. That changes the whole battle from a simple breach into proof that the enemy has already slipped inside the kingdom's defenses. At the wall, the soldiers challenge a battered survivor as he comes in from the chaos, and he insists he's only here to regroup with the comrades who pushed ahead. The captain hears the story, then gets hit with the part nobody wants to say out loud. That whole party is dead. In the dungeon now, two prisoners argue over what just happened, and one of them tries to soften the massacre by calling it necessary. The other refuses to buy that excuse because once people start calling slaughter a solution, they're already halfway to becoming the same kind of monster they claim to fight. That argument snaps into something uglier when the reflection in the mirror shows what the woman is really becoming. The demonic side of her spits back that she is no better than the cultists, and her answer is not mercy but destruction, which tells you guilt has started curdling into rage. Back in the courtyard, Captain is no longer just reporting battle damage. He is chasing a larger prize, the kind of target that changes a war if he can corner her. He speaks to the blonde woman and then keeps moving with cold purpose, because now every clue points toward a much bigger royal problem. Inside the Grand Chamber, Happy is finally being pulled into the center of power instead of the edge of survival. Captain calls him Your Highness, and that single word redefines everything. Happy is not just some arena weapon wandering into the world, he is being treated like someone tied to the throne, and he does not look comfortable with it at all. Happy's own guilt catches up with him the moment the title lands, because he can feel how far he has drifted from the boy he used to be. He admits that he looks strange and fears he is turning into his father, then says the part that really haunts him. He has killed people, and freedom is starting to feel a lot like carrying the arena with him everywhere he goes. Back in the Grand Chamber, Captain and Happy sit in a silence that says more than either of them wants to admit. Captain has just called him Your Highness, so now the room is carrying a dangerous new truth. Happy is tied to royalty, and that means every bruise on him suddenly matters to the kingdom. Princess, the curious royal girl who keeps forcing hard questions onto soft hearts, cuts in with the reminder that people in power do not get clean choices. That lands because Happy is already drowning in guilt, and the story makes it clear that freedom has not made him innocent, only harder to excuse. Happy remembers his foster father, the man who raised him like a child instead of a weapon, and that memory keeps his humanity alive. Lying among the graves at night, he starts to understand the ugly part of his own strength. If he keeps fighting the same way, he may just become another servant of slaughter. Then the thought hits him fully. Happy dreams of a better world, even though he knows he may never live long enough to see it. And that impossible hope still makes his chest swell, which is a ridiculous thing for a man built like a battering ram. But there it is. The masked woman, a mysterious ally who keeps reading Happy more clearly than he reads himself, leans in and tells him he is bright. Then bright enough that even tenderness makes her lose her footing. For a moment, the rough edges drop away, and the two of them end up in an intimate embrace on the floor, because apparently even in this mess, someone still notices the good in him. That soft moment snaps when the masked woman jolts upright and asks where he is now, because her concern has turned into a search. The mood hardens immediately, and Happy's own instincts answer before the facts do. He says he has a bad feeling, which means trouble is already moving somewhere off-screen. That bad feeling becomes real when Happy kneels in distress and someone asks what is wrong. The answer is not comfort, but evidence. Kidnapped nobles are being moved under guard, and the soldiers know they need to keep quiet and follow because whatever is happening next is already bigger than a private rescue. Elsewhere, the battlefield has already paid its bill. One soldier stands among corpses and fallen enemies, and then the awful report lands that only one survivor made it out, which means the enemy, the witness, or both are still loose enough to matter. Happy responds the way he always does when fear turns into a weapon. He yanks the chain with brutal force and takes control of the moment. The point is not the metal, it is the message, because people keep reacting to him like he is the thing in the dark that they should have prayed not to meet. Another man demands to know what everyone is talking about, and then the scene pivots to someone speaking directly to Happy as if they have been expecting him all along. That turns the mystery from chaos into design, because this is no longer random violence. It is a meeting that has been waiting for the right monster to arrive. A young boy with an axe ends up ringed by soldiers, and then Happy appears in a formal hall facing two seated figures who want answers. The kingdom is clearly tightening the net from every side, because once armed men start circling children and nobles in the same breath, nobody is just a bystander anymore. Back with the officials, Captain studies the paperwork while everyone else keeps pretending this is normal. One officer presses him for the truth, and the wound analysis matters because it points to something staged or hidden rather than a clean stab, which means the battlefield report is already lying to somebody. Captain stands alone in the forest long enough to realize this battle is not simple cleanup anymore. The blood on his hand tells him somebody has already paid for the lie, and now he has to decide whether he keeps following orders or starts naming the real enemy. Back on the farmland, the enemy stops pretending this is a private grudge and turns it into a raid, while the soldiers scramble to keep the line from breaking. One woman drives forward shouting for the farm, and the fight turns brutal fast, because this place is now exactly what everyone is dying to protect. Elsewhere in the chaos, the investigation points to a much bigger problem. Only the Lord's henchmen know the road to his land, which means the whole campaign depends on a hidden route and a bunch of people nobody trusts. That is why the military reports start getting tangled the second they try to explain where the enemy is really headed. Then the rumors twist the war into something worse, because someone in the crowd starts asking whether Happy is the demon's kid and a trainee knight, and another voice answers like it is gospel that the child of God has descended. Happy is not just a fighter anymore. He is getting dragged into a mess of faith, bloodline, and royal expectation all at once. Near the destination, the trackers and riders both sense they are closing in, and that is the part nobody likes in a hunt, because the prey can start hunting back. Even the scarred man can tell they are almost there too, which means the whole force is converging on the same hidden land from different angles. Happy finally makes the choice out loud. Take him to that land because he is done letting other people decide what his freedom costs. When someone asks if he means all of them, the answer hangs in the air like a warning. Because if Happy goes after this path alone, he is also choosing to carry the whole burden by himself. Back on the road to the Demon Land, the first real clash starts with Happy facing a massive armored foe. And the point is not who swings harder, but whether Happy can actually open the path ahead. The opponent still has enough reach to make this ugly, so every move now decides whether the expedition lives long enough to reach its target. At the edge of that path, everyone finally gets a look at the demon the kingdom has feared for years, and the ugly joke is that he looks more like a huge human than a bedtime nightmare. That does not make him safer, it just makes the question worse, because now Sagar is wondering whether one clean strike to the heart could end this before the whole army pays for it. Sagar breaks into a run with the others close behind, and the urgency changes from planning to survival. He knows the enemy is moving too fast, so now he is thinking like a man who has run out of elegant options, and is considering a dirty backstab before the moment disappears. On the dusty road into the hidden land, Happy and the others finally catch the enemy trail, but the first warning is just hoofbeats in the distance. Sagar and the soldiers have no time to settle their nerves, because this run has turned into a chase where one mistake means the whole unit gets split apart. Then Happy makes the ugly choice that keeps him alive. He attacks from the blind side before the enemy can organize, and the soldiers around him barely have time to understand why the air suddenly turns violent. His strength is doing the talking now, and it proves the same thing it always does, that if someone hesitates around Happy, they get folded like cheap armor. Once the first clash breaks their formation, Happy stops thinking like a prisoner and starts thinking like the apex weapon everyone fears. He hammers one opening after another until the battlefield stops being a fight and becomes a warning label, with bodies on the ground and survivors realizing they are nowhere near his level. Back in the enemy's own path, the masked figure does not flinch even after seeing what Happy can do, which means this chase is not over by a mile. That refusal matters, because it tells everyone watching that the enemy came for Happy on purpose, and still believes he can finish the job. As the group pushes deeper through the field, the pace finally drops just enough for the trackers to read the ground, and that tiny pause becomes the whole story. One man wants rest, another is too stunned to even pretend that is a good idea. But the real answer comes from the footprints. The enemy never slowed down, so the only choice left is to keep following before the trail